run full screen and then present. So, like I said, this is going to be a nice video about everything that has happened in the past 3 years involving me and the Mastercraft project that you guys have witnessed on stream. I'm going to try to, well, not convince you. I don't feel like convincing anyone. I just want to clearly present what happened, the actual story, because there's been a lot of smack talking and a lot of lies and a lot of people, disappointed people, spewing shit, and it's best if we have the actual facts that happened, because I feel like this has taken a lot of my time. I put a lot of energy into it, and not just me, but like more people, of course. I'm only talking about myself. I don't know how they feel about it, but I feel like I've put a lot of energy into it, and you'll see as I go through the presentation, you'll see exactly what happens. So, welcome everyone. This is the video in which all the so-called myths are being debunked, and this is the actual story of what happened. So, whether you know me or not, I'm going to do a short summary of what this Mastercrafting project is. It's something that I started when I came back to Cabal in 2017, and it's what has happened on stream for the last 3 years. If you haven't been here, you didn't miss much, and this is its story. So, like I said, I started in 2017. This is my gaming and crafting story, starting with 2017. For those of you that don't know me, I've been playing Cabal since it got released, actually a few months before that, when it was still in closed beta. Most of the time I spent playing between 2006, when it got officially released, I think in May or June, and August of 2012, when I decided to quit because of Diablo 3 and because of other things that had happened in Cabal that made me upset. You know, people happened. Most of you might know me or remember me from the forums of the previous publishers, gamesmasters.com. That's where I spent a lot of my time, in the technical section, helping people fix their client. Or from the wizard section, where I was an active wizard poster, trying to teach people how to play a better wizard. Not the best, but at least a better wizard. Or from the time when I was a game master for Cabal Europe, and I'd like to clarify, I've never been a game advisor, I've never been a game advisor leader. I was actually invited by Caesar and crew, two of the GMs back then, to join the GM team straight up, without being an advisor, without being an advisor leader or any of that. So I didn't beg for the position like some people said. I actually got a message in my inbox one day asking me if I would like to join their team. And that happened between 2009 and 2011. I was answering support tickets mostly, technical tickets. I was banning people in-game. I was cleaning bots. I was joining for buffs and stuff. You know, all the kind of things that a GM should do, posting on forums, trying to help people and so on. Like I said, I quit in 2012. I came back at the end of March 2017, I think on the 25th of March. Obviously, when you come back to an empty account, restarting was kind of difficult for me, but I needed something to keep me going because in the previous 2006 2012 period, I've been farming for items and alts and just to be a power player like everyone else, combined with a few other side gigs that I had, but mostly power playing. So I needed something to keep me going because just grinding for alts to beat people up is not fun, at least not for me. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm not looking for something like that in games, so I need something that's meaningful to me at least. So I looked at the state of economy. I opened Auction House. I started looking at what's available in Auction House to get an idea of how the economy looks like. And one of the things that I've said on stream as well, and that has shocked me somehow, was the fact that not much emphasis was given to crafting. Because when I looked at Auction House, most of the things that I saw were outrageous and fatal items, which are drops. So I came up with an idea to keep myself interested. And that idea was, of course, master crafting, which is how to get top of the line items for no costs, or at least no additional costs other than making them. So now, of course, I didn't know if it could be done. I always knew that crafting requires a lot of two slots resources in general and a lot of money because I used to be a crafter back then as well, back in 2006. I knew I had nothing. Like I started from scratch. It was a fresh account. I didn't even have. I had a level 1 character. I forgot to add the picture, but I had a level 1 character. It's on my Facebook if you want to see it. But first and foremost, I knew where I had to start. I needed to build a guild, or at least I wanted to build a guild, a real guild, not these fake ass guilds that you have these days of people grouped up together because it gives nice guild rewards. And I wanted the whole guild to be involved in this project, so it would be the thing that brings us together. Like just get a group of people that are interested in the same type of topic, and then with them just be able to build a guild and get everybody involved. And I wanted these hardworking legitimate players to be the first ones to get mastercrafts thanks to this plan that I had, which was supposed to put us ahead of everyone. I wanted cheaters because I kind of noticed that Cabal is full of cheaters and abusers and alts buyers. I wanted them to get their hands last, or hopefully never, because if things would have gone well, they would have also gotten mastercrafts, but at the end, like sort of like a punishment, or more of a, not so much a punishment for cheaters as much as a reward for legitimate players that had a plan and that worked as a guild. So the plan was for us to get them first and reward people for their efforts, and then whatever else. I didn't care about what other people had. I wanted to prove with this that hard work and intelligence pays off instead of alts buying. And of course, I wanted the group of people that I would build this with to transition into being a top class guild, hopefully with profit from these items split, as you will see in future slides. There was a plan for the profit to be split as well. And last but not least, I was hoping that I could enjoy the time doing this, because it's always fun when you have a plan. You have the company of great people, and then you just put these together and you start working on something that I think was great. It's always enjoyable to see things grow and to build things that nobody else has built before you. Sadly, not much of this was accomplished, as I'm about to present, but as you read on through this presentation, which I will make public as well, you will come to realize that some of the positive things and the downsides of having gone through such a complex project kind of influenced much of my development across the past 3 years. Whereas I started as a very optimistic and full of energy type of individual, which was reflected in how I was playing, I am now the complete opposite. I'm slightly disappointed, or more disappointed than I would have imagined. Anyway, you'll see. I don't want to go into details right now because that's getting ahead of me. But you could even say that the thing that we made was actually a social experiment gone wrong. Because the reason why I say it was a social experiment is because people tend to treat MMOs like games. And they are games to some extent, don't get me wrong. But the behavior that people exhibit in games is the way that people behave in real life as well. You cannot be a scumbag in game and an upstanding citizen in real life. If you're a cheater in the game, most likely you're a cheater in real life as well. Why? Because most people take their behavior and usually make it worse, and then they apply it in a game, in an online game where their avatar becomes an unpunishable character that they can exploit other people with, and so on. So most likely nasty people in real life will be just as nasty or even worse in online games because they don't get punished. Anyway, that's why I think it's a social experiment, because even though it happened in an online environment, it happened with real people, and it contained their real behaviors, which is why I think it's a social experiment. Nevertheless, like I said in the beginning, there were a lot of lies and misinformation that were being spread by various individuals in the game, and I would like to take some time to address those lies, because they are lies, and now that the project is almost over, you'll get to see why. And believe me when I say that everything I've put in this presentation, which took me a long time to complete, is the actual truth. I have no reason to lie. I'm not a liar in general. Maybe I lie about petty things like, did you take out the trash? And I say yes, and I didn't actually take out the trash and shit like that. But I would never lie about stuff that involves other people just to hurt them or to belittle them or to make them look bad. I would lie about myself. Like, are you fat? No. Stuff like that. But before I go into details, I would first of all try to explain the foundation of the idea. So the thought process that went in my head when I came with this idea. And for that, I need to go back a bit to describing how Cabal works, so that you guys get to understand and see where all of this came from. So at a macro level, which means, at a macro level, this is it. Cabal is a pretty simple game. Back when I started playing it, like a few months after playing it, I realized that money is not the answer to all of your problems. And the reason I say that is because you could have infinite money and there would be nothing for you to buy in auction house. So obviously money does not have power. It has a certain amount of power, but it's not everything and anything. So I came up with the idea of a term called macroeconomy, which in games, like most of you know that I work in gaming, so these things kind of relate. It was easy to identify the way that the design was made for Cabal. And the idea of macroeconomy is that value translates into money. And you'll see later on why this is true. Value translates into ALS, or money or gold, as a quantity, but value, which I will define later on, has higher quality than ALS, and it's much easier to come by. At the very basic level of the game, when you just start playing Cabal, the game is played in a very simple fashion. Like, it's by far the easiest game to play. which is why a lot of people think they know how to play it, because it's so easy to get into it. And the point of the game is that you spend real life time, so you spend some of your time killing things that are being spawned by the game endlessly, like it's an infinity of monsters because they have a respawn timer. So you spend your time killing things and getting some artificially created drops which are being generated by the game. This equals to a simple formula at the end of the day, because the amount of time you spend killing these things and the speed with which you kill these things, which is your kill power or your kill rate, which is your attack ability, this time and speed of killing will create a certain drop or value. And I say value because those drops can be equalized to a certain value. So whenever you kill a monster in Cabal or in a dungeon or whatever, it has a fixed drop table. It's a fixed percentage. Upgrade core high drops 50% or has a 50% chance of dropping from a certain monster. In the long run, if you kill 100, you get 500 upgrade cores. And this is the value that this percentage of 50, for instance, is the default value that you can further modify with various factors, making your time spent in-game worth more or less. As a quick example, I gave the Lakeside Ogre example, which I like to have handy. If you have a Lakeside Ogre with supposedly 12,000 life, and you kill it with a 2000 DPS character, that takes you 6 seconds, because it's 2000 DPS, 12,000 life, 6 seconds. That ogre has a 3% chance, random value, has a 3% chance to drop a stack of discs, a stack of 10 discs. This means that for every 198 seconds, because you have 3% chance out of 100, that's 33 multiplied by 6 seconds, which is the amount of time it takes you to kill the monster. Every 3 minutes and 20 seconds, you get a stack of 10 discs. If you multiply this frequency of drops with 10 hours, you end up with 181 stacks of 10 discs, which in 10 hours of farm, you end up with 1,810 discs for 2000 DPS, whatever that means in-game. So with this example, I just translated 10 hours of farming into 14 stacks of discs, right? Those 14 stacks of discs could have any value which is given by the state of economy, the state of the game, and auction house, most probably. So your equivalent amount of money that you've gained in these 10 hours is roughly 36 millions every hour, because all those stacks right now in Venus, for instance, were worth 364 millions. So right now, you just made 36 millions every hour on average. And if you repeat the same example, but you double your attack, not your attack ability, but like your DPS, then you do 2 times the amount of money, because you drop them 2 times faster, because you have 2 times more damage in the same amount of time. So what happens is you can supplement the time spent in-game with more kill rate, which equals more killing power, which equals more attack ability, which equals more drops and value. Pretty simple so far. Everybody knows this. So as a conclusion, you have drop tables which decide our certain chances for having either items or alls. There are fixed chances for everyone. There are not separate drop tables for separate people. There's nobody hating you, giving you the shittiest drop tables in the game. No, everyone has the same percentages. The choice of your farm location is critical, because you need to find the best places for certain items. As you know, upgrade core medium for Tower of Undead B1F, force core high, upgrade core high in Seal of Darkness. If you're looking for I don't know, certain items, you need to know the highest places where those things drop. And attackability is just a time saver, which allows you to get more things done in the same amount of time. Like I said in the previous ogre example, there are also certain boosts and potions, mainly premium, increasing the dungeon difficulty, certain blessing beads, certain damage potions. All of these just help you save time. And some of them, like premium and blessing beads and so on, also change, and dungeon difficulty also change and influence the percentage of certain drops. Some increase damage, some increase output. If you put these together, you have more damage, more output, which equals even more output. So obviously it helps playing with premium and having high attackability, because you end up generating more and more and more out of the game, because the game has a specific respawn, a specific amount of monsters, a specific amount of value that it produces, and the more you exploit, it's like going into a gold mine with a little pickaxe in the beginning, and as you get more gold back to town, back to the city, you bring back excavators and you get more and more and more out of this endless gold vein, which is the game, because the game will always spawn monsters, it will always allow you to go dungeoning, so it can generate an infinity of resources. And it depends if you go with a tiny fork or with a tiny pickaxe, or if you go with an amazing excavator and then take the whole mountain with you. But like I said, the next day the mountain is back there, so you can keep taking more and more out of it. Anyway, we can change this drop table. And I forgot to mention the fact that in this example, value drops more often than alls, because monsters in general do not drop alls. They drop a very tiny amount of alls and a greater amount of alls as value through drops, right? So we can change the drop table using certain properties like I just mentioned. You can increase the dungeon difficulty and then adjust the drop table to give you more or less crafts, more or less upgrade cores, depending on what you're looking for. You have your character level influencing the drop table as well, or at least it used to influence it, meaning that a higher level character will not get an RW3 in Arena Station, but you might get one when you level up your character. And also the type of dungeon, because these dungeons have a predefined drop table. And if you have multiple dungeons with the same drop table, one of them will give upgrade cores more often than the other. So then if you have 2 dungeons or 3 or 4 giving you the same types of drops, you have to identify which one is the best for you. And you can shorten the time it takes to drop these things through boosts, events. If you're talking about chests, you can use box drop rate, or you can simply increase dungeon difficulty, and then mobs have higher level, and then because of higher level they give other drops, and some drops become unavailable and some drops become available. I'm not going to go into much detail over how the drop system works. That's going to be in a different video. But the point is that you can shorten the amount of time you have to spend getting this value out of the game by increasing your attackability, which is bringing an excavator instead of a pickaxe, and kill rate, which means bringing 3 excavators instead of 3 pickaxes. So you can have more attackability, which leads to greater kill rate. The result of all of this that I've just said is that you end up with a certain value per hour, which you've heard me mention an infinite amount of times on stream. For any given attackability, which equals to a certain DPS, damage per second, for a given damage per second in a given dungeon, all characters will get roughly the same value per hour. Of course, you have factors such as dungeon difficulty, your attackability and boosts and so on influencing this, but if you take 2 wizards at the same attackability and you make them run the same dungeons in the same conditions, they will all get the same value per hour, plus minus a small percentage because of distribution of drops. And it's important to notice that the value that I'm talking about is not always money. Just for further reference, And it's also important to remember that you should prioritize value over ALs as long as your economy is healthy, which means you should never go farm ALs as long as you can get your drops sold. And I gave a quite frequent example saying that there's no point in farming fourscore pieces in Lake in Dusk when you get 7 stacks every hour in Lake in Dusk for 2 millions each, when you can farm that 14 millions elsewhere. And then you buy the fourscore pieces from auction house, as long as those fourscore pieces exist. If fourscore pieces or the drop that you're looking for doesn't exist in abundance, then obviously their value goes higher. So instead of having 2 millions for every stack, you end up with 6, 7, 8 millions for every stack, and then the 7 stacks that you would farm in Lake in Dusk are now suddenly worth 56 millions an hour instead of 14 millions an hour, simply because there are not that many that are available. So for somebody that makes less than 40 millions an hour, like I said, on value per hour, depending on the best dungeon that they can do at their attack ability or the most profitable, then it might be worth spending time in Lake in Dusk as long as those fourscore piece stacks are worth more than 40 millions an hour, which in this case would be 5.7, because you get 7 stacks every hour at your given attack ability. So as long as the stacks are more than 5.7, you're gonna get that 40 millions. If fourscore pieces fall below 5.7, that's also going to influence the amount of value per hour that you get and that you can convert into money. So then you should probably go farm money, ALs, elsewhere, and then you buy those fourscore pieces. So below that value, you go farm them, you go farm money elsewhere, and then you buy fourscore pieces. If those items become too expensive, then you might as well just go farm them, because you probably save money. So this is what was in my head when I came up with the idea of a contribution system, and I will mention it a few times from moving forward. And the concept is relatively simple. You have a group of people that convert this value that they generate every hour based on their attack ability and based on how much time they play, how much time they spend playing, not dancing, so just playing, based on how much time they kill things, and based on their attack ability, which influences how many things they get to kill in an hour. You can convert some of this value into something greater than just money, because at some point, if you throw an infinite amount of resources at the game, then those things will gradually lower in value. So instead of doing that, which is what everyone does these days, they just farm and try to sell things and try to get money. But the more things they farm, they don't get more money, they get less money, because those things drop in value. So I decided I'm going to convert all this effort and value into something greater than just money, something that money on its own could not generate, something that, regardless of how much money you would have to have some work done, because just having ALs in your inventory wouldn't generate mastercrafts. So this important thing that I saw was going to be achieved with careful planning, a lot of work, and most importantly, it would be free of charge, because people have already spent their value from farming. So why would it be free? Like I said plenty of times, I'm not an ALS chaser. I don't give a feck about money. But because of the time multiplied by attack ability generates a certain amount of value, or ALs per hour, so too can you use some of that value to convert the drops into something more amazing. So instead of dropping certain things and selling them as individual ingredients or components or materials, instead of selling them individually, you take those things and you turn them into something even greater, which is mastercrafts in this case. And then obviously that's going to give you more value than what you just dropped, because you can drop 15 billions of materials separately and you can try to sell those if it even works, or you can turn that 15 billions into 20, 25 billions, if you have the ability to craft certain things. So when you do this, you generate more value out of monsters because your materials were now used for a greater purpose, and you can now generate more crafts. You generate with this value, you can generate more crafts and so on. And because value is kind of a shady term that was difficult for me to explain to certain people, we had to come up with a system that would actually track down this amount of invested time and invested resources, because we had to properly reward people for their amount of effort. So the idea in itself was crazy, and at that time, it was revolutionary, at least because nobody had ever done it, to my knowledge, because it meant I needed to have 100% transparency towards the people working, and it needed a lot of communication to tell them what to do and to convince them to do certain things, just like in a project, like any project in real life. And of course, you needed a lot of teamwork, but most importantly, they needed to trust me, because the way that the game was made, and the way the game is made, is that you have to craft on certain characters. Those characters are on an account. Somebody owns that account. It's not like a guild festival in the game where everybody can have access to it, sadly. So they needed to trust me that once they give me these values every hour, that I would give them back the outcome. And to me, that wasn't a problem, because like I said, I never scammed anybody in my Cabal past is flawless, and even present and future is flawless. Last time I cheated in a game was when I was 16 or 17 or something, so that's like 20 years ago. Because I don't do it. So, but I think we can all agree that those things that I've just mentioned, like transparency, communication, teamwork, and most importantly, trust, all of those things are very rare in today's Cabal. I don't know what it is about this game that turns people into scumbags, but that hit me, and I was about to find out. So, crafting in a nutshell is relatively easy. When you craft items, it requires certain materials and resources, but it requires no actual money outside of unlocking those categories, so you can do a higher quality of craft. Crafting in itself requires no pure alls, which means somebody had to farm those materials. Whether you bought them in auction house like some people did, or and even I did that, it's not a shame, but somebody has to go and kill monsters so that you have materials and resources. So crafting does not require money, it requires value. Value which was defined previously as drops every hour. So these materials can either be farmed or they can be bought, depending on availability of every server. Sometimes it's even worth farming expensive materials, as they kind of increase the value per hour that you get. So that results in more contribution. Sometimes it's better to buy them if they're cheap, because it makes no sense to be 200,000 attack ability farming 4 score pieces in Lake in Dusk when you can just buy them. Sometimes, however, you have to sacrifice and do this and get lower value per hour, because those materials simply don't exist. So there's no amount of money that you can gather that will allow you to buy those materials and craft. So that's an edge case that sometimes can happen. Either way, just as you farm a certain value every hour, which is farm speed multiplied by time spent in-game, so does crafting follow the same principle. Every 5 minutes you regenerate energy. Every minute you regenerate 5 energy, which means that in 60 minutes or an hour you can regenerate 300 energy. For a crafting character in 24 hours, that's 7,200 energy, which everybody could regenerate. If you divide this by 112 energy, which is the amount of energy it takes to... I'm gonna disable alert box for a second. There we go. If you divide all this energy to 112, which is the requirement for a Palladium, you end up with roughly 62 characters, 62 crafts per day per character in a default scenario. So without any kind of craft potions and so on, you're gonna craft 62 Palladiums every day on every character. And it's important to mention that because when you think of 62 crafts, you think of value. You don't think of items or a specific number. So 62 62 crafts at Palladium level, for instance, let's say would take more or less 3 billions every day, depending on auction house. So crafting could consume at the highest level around 100 billions every month, which is definitely not easy to do for just one guy or even a small group of guys with low attack ability. Because if you're trying to craft at full speed on a single crafter, you're gonna end up spending 100 billions because you can craft 62 every day, which is 2,000 every month or so, 1,800. And each of those crafts on their own take a certain amount of value, so you put those together and you end up with 100 billions of expenses. So if you go back to the value per hour formula which I described, 90 billions a month with an average of 52 millions every hour, which is achievable by most lower level people, that equals almost 2,000 hours. It's 1,900 hours. If you take that and you think about how many hours that is 64 hours every day. Obviously there are 24 hours in a day, so that means you have to get something like 20 people farming 3 hours on a daily basis for 52 millions every hour just to cover the expenses of one crafting character. So that's crazy. But this is where it begins. Like I said, I started playing Cabal in 2017 on 25th or 27th, I don't remember, on Mercury, because I couldn't find anybody from my old group on Jupiter. So I started crafting all these craftsman categories in 2017. So even before I moved to Jupiter, I knew that this is what I wanted to do by myself. So this is not something that I came up with when I heard people wanted to join or when they came to me. This is something that I had started by myself. This was my idea. This was what I wanted to do in the future. And pretty soon I realized this is gonna take a lot more effort than I had initially imagined, because I had no idea. Like I said, I came back after a 5-year break. I don't know how Cabal's played these days. I just started doing something which is something that I knew I wanted to do, and now I had to find a way to do it, because I realized I needed to get much stronger to sustain this financial effort. And I leveled up by myself until 194 or something as a 2,000-3,000 attack ability wizard soloing. I was actually comboing and going battle mode in Arcane Trace and Seni. I never macroed. The worst thing that I did probably was stay next to bots so that I don't die. So I was using them as a shield, but that's pretty much it. I was always there buttoning, I was never macroing. I made use of macroers as shields, but that's pretty much it. So because it was taking way too long at 3,000 attack ability and I was dying a lot because I was, 1,000 defense ability or something, I decided to buy some vouchers and get some XP services when I understood what those are. I bought some XP services from an older player that I knew just by name at the time to level myself to level 200, and that obviously helped me a lot, because at level 200, like I said, you have maximum damage, you need damage for more value, you get the point. So in September, after switching back and forth between Mercury and Jupiter, at the time it was Jupiter, I decided to move to Jupiter with all the things to the left. So everything you see to the left is what I had done by myself on Mercury. And I took all of this, which is an average of 4,500 or so. I took all of this to Jupiter because I reconnected with some of my former guild members from either Altus Spera times or Arise times or from Knights of Shadow and so on. And upon moving, like I said, I already had these categories at roughly Shadow Titanium levels for all craftsmen. And because I couldn't find the right people on Mercury, I didn't look too hard. That's also true, but I couldn't find the right people. Like everyone I saw was macroing, they were buying ALs, they were shamelessly talking about hacking and scamming and so on. So I was like, whoa, 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 let me change. I don't need this kind of people in my life. So I moved to Jupiter, and I was hoping that because I knew these guys and I knew that they were legitimate players and I trusted them, I was hoping that it would work. So between September and January, all of the members of the newly formed guild, Smithereens on Jupiter, farmed as a group, right? There was no debate. We all did as much as we could until I realized some of the people spent considerably more time than others #working for the welfare of the project. And I was like, hold on, this is not fair. Because some people spend a lot of time doing Lake in Dusk and Rena Station and everything we needed, while other people went to TGs and minding their own business. So obviously it was unfair because at the end we were all supposed to get the output of this effort. And because it was unfair for just a few of us to do most of the work, while others just waited for us to finish, I came up with a system that rewarded people for their work. So I made a spreadsheet, which some of you have seen, and I came up not just with a spreadsheet for tracking purposes, but I also came up with a contribution system in which everything that everybody ever contributed gets recorded, which translates into meritocracy, which means if you do things, you get things. And you get things based on how much you've done. And all this data in the spreadsheet, because like I said, between 2017 September and 2018 January, so for 3 or 4 months, until I realized all of this, there was no tracking. So I don't know who did how much. I know I did a lot. A friend of mine, Sochi, also did a lot. There are a couple of older members that also have done a lot, but I never tracked it. Like it was just visual. When I logged on, I saw some people in Rena Station and other people in TG and stuff like that. So it's just a feeling that I had, but I had no actual facts, no numbers to rely upon. So starting with the next year in 2018, I kept this contribution spreadsheet up to date. So everything that me and others have done prior to 2018 is kind of lost. Like nobody can tell, like all this effort of mine from April to December is lost. Like nobody knows how much that was. But we did continue working on maxing out all the craftsmen's. But this time around, I didn't just do it like I never kept secrets, but like I never told people what I'm doing anyway. So I imagined that by putting it out there and them seeing progress and such, that they would be more involved. And so doing this on the 16th of March in 2018, we had katanas reach 10,000, and this was the first category that had reached 10,000 since April 2017. So it took us almost a year to get the first category to 10,000. And the whole point of the contribution system was simple. Like every second that you spend farming needs to be rewarded somehow. And being a contributor means that you accept to be paid later for materials that we use today. Because you need to use things first to generate output. You cannot have profit before output, and you cannot have output before input. So this worked kind of like a banking system, but without the nasty things that banks do. So contribution is just another term for value which is craft materials and sometimes ALS that was required to generate craftsmen's and mastercrafts. All contributions, so this entire value would eventually be repaid fully, and on top of that you would also get, based on how much you did of the whole thing as a percentage, you would get that from sales as dividends, kind of like dividends in banks. So your percentage of total contribution actually represents the total amount of money that you will get back from sales. And obviously we had a certain amount of a certain type of materials that were accepted, and so only those increased your percentage, and all other things people could do whatever they wanted with them, like they were not needed. And so this percentage described how much you would get back from sales of the whole thing, of the whole project, but it also determined the priority that you had for items, because higher percentage wizards would have priority over lower percentage wizards, because it means that they've done more. So it's normal for them to receive things first. So it was like a friendly competition of who does more. Like, we could compete, but in a friendly fashion, not in a I'll take your items, you nasty MF, just like, let's do a friendly competition so that we can all push each other forward to do more and more. And I also said that there will be no discounts for items, because you get the money back from sales and percentages anyway. So why would I give you a discount for something that you gave me? So you give me 10 billions and then I give you back 7 plus 3. How does that work? Like, if it cost me 10 billions to make an item, you're gonna get back 10 billions. So there's no point for any discounts, because you just cut your own profit somehow. So the guild obviously was seen as an entity that everybody had to follow, like myself included. I was not an exception. Like, I followed the same principles as everyone else. I farmed like everyone else. I was supposed to get percentages like everyone else. If somebody had higher percentages than me, they would get items first. Like, I had no problem with that. And there's one observation that I had at the time, and I told everyone that the guild and the project in itself will never offer services to individuals, even to them. So even if they wanted from the project to do a service, they would not be serviced. Why? Because I consider these services to be a scam. I've said this numerous times. I'm going to explain it in detail in a later slide. But it's something that players have invented. I'm going to do a service so that they can get free levels free of charge. And the reason why I say it's a scam, or it's a lie, because the risk lies with the player instead of the crafter. Because when you use somebody else's materials and you don't give them anything back, when those materials fail, then you didn't actually do a service. You just did them a favor by using the resources, but that's it. Like, when you do a service, you expect something back. And because of how unstable crafting is, somebody can bring materials for tens of hundreds of crafts and get no perfect crafts, while somebody that brings only 10 or 15 can get the result because of averages and because of the way that crafts and drops are distributed. Like, somebody can run 10,000 dungeons and get nothing, and then another guy runs 10 and gets a slot extender. It's the same concept. Somebody can craft plenty of items and get nothing, and then somebody crafts 10 items and gets two perfects, which is very unfair, But anyway, that's how the game works. So the workaround that we found was, we buy all the materials, we sell all the crafts. The risk is on the project itself, because we work with averages, and we give everybody profit based on their percentages. So there will be no services ever, because of what I just said. Anyway, moving forward. The concept was simple. The project was seen like a bank that deals with value instead of vowels, which means materials, discs, shapes, 2 slots, Fourscore crystal upgrade, everything that was required for crafting was converted into value instead of vowels. So instead of giving them money, I would give them virtual money, which is value. So it's like using a credit card. You don't actually have cash, but money is on your credit card, right? And I represented the project because somebody had to, like somebody actually had to click crafts and shit. But at the same time, I wasn't their boss. I was an equal duties member that was doing a favor to some people, because on top of just doing what everyone else did, I did a couple of extra things, right? And everyone, including myself, followed the same rules. There was nobody above the law. Like, we all had the same rules. And because we started with nothing to produce something that had a greater value than nothing, we needed to use this kind of a debt system for investments, because you cannot make any kind of money at low levels. So we kind of had to take materials using a debt system to be able to produce things, and then we exchanged all of that into virtual contribution or virtual money. It's like a credit line where you have an overdraft and you go to the bank and you don't have the money, but you still have the money. So even if you don't have money, you can still get a loan and stuff like that. And the whole point was you invest now and you get stuff later on, simply because there weren't many mastercrafts that were better than Arcridium or Palladium Craftsman, which were top of the line at the time. So it made no sense to get Osmium Mastercrafts and try to beat Palladium's Craftsman, because it doesn't work like that. So the only thing that was better than a Palladium Craftsman was an Arcridium. So only Arcridium and Palladium were better than top of the line. So when it came to making money, at SIG level, for instance, we would slowly start to give people their money back through items, not ALs. So this project was meant to convert materials into items and give people back items, and on top of items give them the difference in ALs from sales. So ALs was never a part of the deal, and it's important to mention this because you'll see later on why some people got upset when I told them, you don't deserve money, you deserve items, because this is our agreement. This is what we agreed. You give me things, materials, and I convert them into items. And those items have a value, right? So we would give them back items, and everybody on top of that would be getting a percentage of all the sales based on how much they contributed to the whole thing. So if you had 10 billions of contribution out of the total of 50, let's say, then that would be a fifth, 20%. So 20% of all future profit, whatever, from selling mastercrafts would be his or hers. And of course, this value of 20% would change, because as I get more, you get less, because in total we have to have 100% of the entire value. So if I start farming more suddenly, then all of your percentages go lower because of my percentage increasing, like the ratio. So obviously this was like a friendly competition. Just don't fall behind, because you know you're gonna lose money. So the whole point was to incentivize people to compete, but in a friendly manner. And of course, you could have seen it as a secondary or even primary form of revenue. Like, it could have been any of that. So with this in mind, we had a system, we had all the necessary details, and the guild grew, and the project grew, and we started taking more and more people. And yes, I kept all these pictures in Discord, and it took me days, if not weeks, to search the Discord for them, but I'm happy that I posted them every now and then, because it actually shows facts, right? So these are from our Discord from 2017 up to present day. And so the guild grew, the project grew, we started taking more and more people that have heard about the project, because at the time in 2018, I think I had also started streaming, or even sooner. And so word spread, thanks to streaming, thanks to people seeing my name in game and so on. And oh, is it really you? Is it? So most players at the time in June or so, around summer of 2018, as you can see, were 2000 or 3000 attack ability. And the reason why this is obvious is because I asked them to write down their attack ability, optionally their defense ability as well, but mostly attack ability and drop rate, so that we would know who has how much attack ability and what can they do and how much drop rate do they have, to know if they can farm maps, if they can go dungeoning. So it's just an efficiency thing, displaying your attack ability and your drop rate so that we know how to coordinate. It had nothing to do with EP-ness or I have more than you fucking loser, and none of that. No, it was strictly for efficiency purposes, because if somebody asked me what can I do to help, I would open the guild and I would check their attack ability and I would see that they have 800 and I would tell them to farm lid. So that's the whole purpose of attack ability being displayed. At the time, I think I was 2,500 or something, after a whole year. So I spent a whole year, because I was 2000 attack ability when I hit level 200 back in June 2017 or something. So ever since I bought those XP services from Thier, I was 2000 or something attack ability, and a year later I had the same goddamn amount. So I had the same amount of attack ability, because everything that I had done in those 12 months went into crafting. Absolutely everything, without exception. And so the guild, because it grew so much, the guild was composed of contributors that were people in the sheet that I was keeping track of their work, and also non-contributors, because I knew we needed to have a bit of both, just to have more people in the guild that would potentially be converted into contributors, because it would make no sense to have 5 people in the guild, all contributors, and then struggle with that. So I brought in an additional 15-20 people, hoping that they would transition to, once we got to know each other and so on, they would transition to being a contributor for the project. So by the end of July 2018, so this is like 15 months later, the average value for craftsmen had reached almost 9,000 points, and we were kind of getting ready to close the whole craftsman project. Several parts, like I said, those katanas and blades and so on, had reached 10,000 by that time, and most of us were busy farming red osmiums and alls and materials and everything that was required after 8,000. So because of the previous phases, such as titanium farming in Lake in Dusk, shadow titanium farming in Rena Station, and osmium farming in Lakeside and Seal of Darkness and Tower of Undead, I noticed that some of the contributors were completely uninterested in what was happening. So even in the group of contributors that we had, well, contributors according to them, they were still not interested. And now it wasn't just a feeling that I had or something that I could see when I logged on and I saw them doing something else, something completely different all the time. So I never asked people to do stuff for the project all the time, but at least some of the time. And these are guys that were doing something else all the time, like consistently doing something else. And I noticed that some of them were uninterested. So I started making some charts, right? Because I'm working with charts all day at work and so on. So I started making some charts to paint a picture, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I was out of words, so I said, fine, I'll make a picture so that you guys can see. Because maybe you don't understand sentences, you'll see a picture. So if you look at the sheet, there was already a big difference, like a discrepancy, in terms of how much each member had done so far. Because I had 13 billions of contribution. Uncle Psy, which is my buddy Sochi, had 7 billions or something. And we were both 3,000 attack ability solo wizards. And then other members had 6, 3, 3, 3, 4, 2, 2, 1.6, 1. So on. And the average was close to 4,000, which is 4 billions. And granted, it's because of me that the average increased so much, but it still paints a picture, because these guys versus me, they were doing a lot less. But even versus the average that was dictated by everyone, they were still doing a lot less. So they were the ones that dragged the project down, because they were below average. If they had more, the average would be more. But at least at that point, we would all be plus minus the same value. So, like I said, some were above average, some were on point, on average, others were way below it. And at the time, we just moved on, because I kept hoping that the situation would be better, because people kept telling me in chats, oh, I'm just farming. I took a break from contribution because I need to increase my attack ability so I can farm more for the project. And I was like, okay, seems like a legitimate explanation of why you're not doing much, because you need to increase your attack ability. Even though I was the lowest attack ability in the guild and I was doing the most, I imagined not everybody is a robot like me, and so maybe they wanted to increase their attack ability every now and then to see some kind of progress in other places than just contribution. And so I didn't expect them to be like me and freeze their attack ability for a whole year just to farm like crazy. So I was like, okay, fine, no problem with that. Just remember that we need to increase the values, right? And that's what they told me. I need to farm other things and sell things to get money, to get attack ability, because I want to contribute more. That was the general explanation. So by the end of August in 2018, the values, these attack values of most of the players were actually not being reflected in the results. And this thing that they had told me with, I'm increasing my attack ability so that I can contribute more, was just a lie. And it was selfish, because what it actually meant was, I'm going to increase my attack ability and play the game while being in the guild without actually helping you, which was the whole point of the guild. And not just helping you, but like helping the project. Because, like I said, we started the guild revolving around the project. If you do not revolve around the project, then you stray away like planets in outer space. So if you don't want to be a satellite for the project, you can fuck off out of the solar system. And so, despite several players having more than 3,000 attack ability, in fact, I think I was the lowest attack ability all the time in the guild, because a couple of people had way more than 3,000, like you can see from the screenshots, we had people at 3,000, 5,000, 9,000 even, 20,000. So we had a good bunch of people that could have farmed Sienna 1, Sienna 2 for Red Osmiums for 2 slots, but we were still missing those 2 slots and money. And if you look at the values to the left, they represent the average number of millions contributed per week. So if you look at the white background values, you'll see that I have 2,424 millions, which is 2.4 billions every week as lowest attack ability. And the second guy had 400 millions. So I was farming 6 times more than the next guy that had the same attack ability as me. And I was farming 10 times more than anyone else that had 2, 3, 4 times my attack ability. And of course, like, we were struggling to get them involved. I don't know why they just chose not to do things, because it was easy. Like, if you look at my values, being a solo wizard at 3000 attack ability, farming 2.5 billions a week, because like I said, I gave everything I had, so I know that 2.5 is the entire amount that I was farming. So I was getting like 10 billions every month as a 3000 attack ability wizard. And these guys were all other classes, easier to farm, easier to get money, playing as much as me, and yet they had 10% of my contribution. So we were struggling to get them involved. And seeing this, Sochi, for instance, my right-hand man that was helping me a lot with the project administration and so on, he decided to slow things down as well, because he thought it's unfair. Like, why should I freeze my attack ability when these ungrateful guys just carry on growing their own attack ability, right? So things got worse and worse, because if he switched sides as well, then I was the only idiot that kept on trying to get people committed. And eventually he actually quit entirely. Like, he quit the game, and that was very difficult for me to cope with. But if you look at the amount of attack ability and you compare it to the amount of money that people could, not money, value that people could make, you can see that there are a lot of attack ability, like 5, 6, 7,000 attack ability players that contribute less than 200 millions a week, which on a general farming pattern would be 4 hours. And these are people that had been playing 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but they would be spending 4 hours for the project, 56 hours for themselves. Because you can tell how much they could farm at their attack ability, and let's say 50 was an average, a decent average. When you have 150 millions given per week, that means you spent 3 hours farming for the project and 60 hours for yourself, right? So this is just to highlight differences in approach. And at the time, I had roughly 41% of the entire contribution. Sochi had 6.7, so me and Sochi had like half of the whole thing, even though him and I were 3000 attack ability wizards, like the lowest, right? And then everyone else combined, having hundreds of thousands of attack ability combined, couldn't do as much as 2 wizards at 3000. So by September 2018, which is roughly 1 year after moving, because I moved in September 2017, by September 2018, most of the parts were kind of closing down. The average was roughly 9,700. We were kind of closing down on the Craftsman, Red Osmium, and Sigmetal phase, but I knew that we needed to take a break right after and just increase our attack ability for harder dungeons, because I knew that after 10,000 comes Arcridium and Palladium farming. And from what people had told me at the time, you needed roughly 12,000 attack ability to duo and 20,000 plus for soloing, because Awakened FT2 at the time was actually very difficult. You didn't have wings, you didn't have honor medals, you didn't have many of the things that came after. So back in 2018, Awakened FT2 was rough. It was one of the most difficult dungeons to do. And we needed 12,000 or 20,000 attack ability for that. And if you look at the table, you'll see that I was almost 4,000 attack ability. People that have been playing for themselves were still lower attack ability than me somehow. Even though they didn't give money to the project, they weren't able to increase their attack ability either. How the hell they managed to do that, I do not know. I do not care. All I know is that eventually I started having more attack. I wasn't the lowest attack ability anymore, despite giving everything to the project, versus people that would give very little. So I was still 4,000 attackability. I was still far away from the 12,000 required for Awakened FT2. As you can see from the chart, only Theer was close to being able to solo, and 2-3 people could duo maybe, or trio, let's say. And it was very difficult because we needed a lot more attackability. And I do think that some people grew a lot. If you look at previous pictures, I'm not going to go back, but you can see. The point was that we needed to increase our attackability. So by October 2018, the distribution of this contribution overall was more and more uneven. Especially if you look at the total values produced versus the actual potential at specific attackability of values per week. So if you look at the table, you'll see that I had almost 100 billions in farmed stuff, and other people that had 3, 4, 5 times more attackability than me had 6, 7 billions, 10 billions, 11 billions, and I had 100. And so at this point, tensions started to grow because there was an increasing amount of pressure on my hands. Some of the people that were very motivated in the beginning had begun to demoralize themselves, or they got demoralized in the process. Because I saw this discrepancy between my attackability and my output and their attackability and their output, I started lashing out more and more often. We used to have these weekly guild meetings every Sunday that we used to have for discussions about the project, about the guild, what went on, how did we do this week, what do we have to do next, are there any problems in the guild, does anybody need help, and so on. So like I was actually trying to build a guild. But when I started seeing this discrepancy, all I could say, like I couldn't see anything else, all I could focus on was we need more people to contribute. I cannot do this by myself. You guys need to help. You joined the project and the guild. You kind of, I don't want to say lied, but my expectation when they joined was that they understood what we have to do. And when you understand what needs to be done and you don't do it, I can only interpret it as being ill-intended. Like it's you being a scumbag. Because if you know what happens, and if you see me struggling like this, all alone, and you still choose to do nothing, then maybe you should leave. Or like, why are you here if you're not doing much? So I couldn't get over it. Like all I could think about was we need more people to contribute. And I was stuck. Like I couldn't do more because I had invested 100 billions that I had farmed in a year, which was probably enough to take me to 20,000 attackability or so in the first year. But I invested it all into crafts because I trusted these guys that we would work together, right? So I was stuck. I couldn't get back my money from the project because we had all parts to 10,000 and that was it. That on its own does not produce anything. So halfway into the project, my money was invested 100 billions in the project and 4 or 5 billions into my items. Whereas for them was completely different. They invested 4 or 5 billions into the project and 100 billions plus in themselves. Some of them, not all of them, because some of them were still lower attackability. But the point is, we decided to end the craftsman's as is, and to analyze how things have evolved and then draw conclusions, and then we could see what needs to be done next. I was highly frustrated at the outcome because I felt like I was doing everything by myself, and I think numbers kind of prove it. But the point is that some of the members, whether contributors or non-contributors, they had quit at this point. Some of them officially, some of them were claiming to be playing, but they were playing other games, and when they would log on to Cabal, they would just talk, and then they would get out. So the end of the Craftsman phase was very rough for me, and I distinctly remember it at the end of 2018 in November, because we had a lot of stockpiled two slots that have been saved from previous years, and I decided to do a final push into crafts, but this time I decided to do it with the help of vouchers, by selling vouchers. Until this point, I only sold like 5 or 10 vouchers in a whole year just to get some money for unlocking certain categories of crafts or stuff like that. But this was the first time that I was feeling hopeless. Like I knew that I would not get any help from them, so I had to find a way to deal with it myself and fix it myself. And the problem is, because 100 billions of my money was invested into crafts, I couldn't generate more. Like I knew that I would only generate 10 billions every month, and that would mean zero progress on the project because I would invest all the money into craft anyway. So I had to choose: do I stop and farm 10 billions a month to finish this thing, or do I sell vouchers? Like, what's it gonna be? So I decided that instead of spending 6 months to finalize Craftsman's, I decided to throw like a lot of money into the game. Well, a lot of money versus what I had spent until then, because 1,000 euros in itself is not a lot. But the point is, I got 50 or 60 billions from this. I know I could have bought ALS, but I don't do that, so I could have probably gotten 100 billions plus for this money, but I decided to sell vouchers because I'm not an ALS buyer. So I decided to do this to unlock all the categories, and I brought materials from Mercury because, like I said, um, I just had very little confidence. And I saw the guys in the project not doing much, and I didn't want to beg them to do stuff because I was stuck. And so I decided I'm going to do this final push, and maybe things will be better in the future. But, the best um, prediction of future behavior is past behavior. Now I know that. Back then I was still full of hope, or like frustration, or whichever way you wish to call it. But I should have known that nothing's gonna get better, because if things didn't change in the past, they won't change in the future. Either way, the final figures, I had 100 billions farmed by myself, selling upgrade cores and so on, and 60 billions or something were generated from vouchers, from selling vouchers. And this meant that the final figures at the end of the Craftsman phase, when all parts were 10,000, I had 163 billion. Yeah, I'm stupid, I know. I should have invested 60 billions in my set. A lot of people told me, you're an idiot, you should have invested in your own set first, and then this is how I chose to do it, because I trusted people to help me, and I made a commitment to crafting, and so I don't regret it. But the point is, at the end, I had 163 billions invested. 100 was farmed, 60 was vouchers, and we were able to finish the whole Craftsman phase. And so by December, all Craftsman categories were done. And unfortunately, if you remember, I said we would take a break so that we can itemize, so that we can sell some Craftsmans, hopefully Arcridium, Palladium, Mithril, Sigmetal, anything. Just sell some things, get some money back, give it to people based on percentages. Like if I had made 50 billions profit, I would have given it 25 billions to me because I had 50%, and then give everybody based on their percentage, right? Trickle it down so that we can all increase our attack ability in the light of Awakened FT2 farm. But unfortunately, in December 2018, like 2-3 weeks after we finished with all the craftsmen, there was a patch note which said that master crafting would be severely changed and impacted by requiring 2-slot items at all levels, and this is what you see today currently. So at the time, blue stins were no slot, titanium, shadow titanium 1 slot, and 2 slots were required from osmium and above. And obviously when I heard that, I freaked out because I knew how difficult it is to drop 1-slotted titanium and shadow titanium. I didn't even want to imagine how difficult it would be to drop 2-slotted titanium and shadow titanium. I didn't know that they would boost rates and so on, but at the time I freaked out because I knew that it would slow things down 4 or 5 times slower. So I kind of stopped increasing attack ability, the period of increasing attack ability, because we needed to secure these parts and we needed to get them to 6,000, which is osmium level, just to get past blue stin titanium and shadow titanium. So I had posted on Discord about the plan to do mastercrafts. I told everybody that we're basically fucked when they increase from 1 slot to 2 slot, and I reiterated the contribution sequence, rewarding and so on, and I told people this is what we need to keep from titanium, this is what we need to keep from shadow titaniums. I was able to take all 5 parts to all 5 mastercraft parts to 2000 using class converters in Port Lux. You just go, you buy the Bluestin at the NPC, and then there was a class converter which you took and you applied it on the item and it became a martial blader or a martial wizard and so on. So that only needed owls. Luckily I was able to do that. So after that, in the leftover time of December, we were able to take gloves and helms to 4,000 before New Year's. And then in the first week of January, we also pushed suits to 3,200, and this was done with Lake in Dusk farming, which some of you probably remember, that I was spamming Lake in Dusk and everybody was laughing at me like, ha ha ha, you fucking noob, level 200 farming Lake in Dusk. But at the end of the second week of January, all 4 parts were 4,000. We did that with titaniums. And so obviously this surge of progress was amazing, like the rhythm itself was amazing. And so I had hopes that we would be able to get the parts to 10,000 by summer, which couldn't be farther from the truth. Mostly because of the amount of materials that are required to do Bluestin titanium, shadow titanium versus other parts, and you'll see pretty soon. So the whole month of February we dedicated to shadow titanium farming, and this is when I did those 1,000 and something Rena stations, 30-minute farm at the cow pit, you know. I don't know if you guys remember those moments, but we were able to take gloves to 6,000. So that was the first category that was secured, but we needed to get all 5. So because we ran out of time and titanium weapons weren't really dropping in Lake in Dusk because Lake in Dusk was giving us mostly armors, I decided, you know what, shadow titanium weapons drop quite often in Rena stations, so let's just split. Like some people do it on level 0 and spam the boxes and get weapons, and I will do along with other people. We would farm the cow pit for the armors. So we split the workload, and it did cost us a bit more, 2 slots, than titanium, and it probably was slightly more expensive, but I was willing to make that trade because Shadow Titanium's Arena Station was giving us everything we needed. It was giving us discs for Osmium and above, level 3 discs. It was giving us 2 slots. It was giving us 4 score pieces, upgrade, everything that was needed. So by the end of February, we were able to take both gloves and suits to 6,000, sorry, and they were critical because they had the max crit rate component. And then after suits and gloves, we were able to also push weapons to 4,000, even though they were slightly lagging. And because we had so many boots and helms and weapons, we kind of decided, well, I decided that it would be a good idea because of all the boots that we had and because of the fact that helms and weapons, if we were to use them, we would have to extend them, so that would be greater costs. So I imagined we would be changing suits, gloves, and then instead of weapons and helms, we would change boots first, and then weapons, and then helms, because those need to be extended, so they need to be completely swapped out. So we decided we're gonna push boots. And by the 10th of March, so like half of March had passed, and almost all parts had been taken to 6,000 before the patch. By the 25th of March, so end of March, this is 2 years. I don't know if you noticed this anomaly, but on the 25th of March 2019 is exactly 2 years after I started playing. We hit 6,000 in almost all parts, minus a few points in boots. And just a few days after, like 5 or 6 days after, the patch got introduced and we were able to secure everything. So if you take into account 2 years of work, that is 700 days, more or less. In 700 days, we only had a margin error of 5 days. Because after 5 days after we finished, the patch was introduced. So if I had done anything different in those 700 days that would have delayed us by even 5 days more, we would not have done it. And people told me, oh, you should stop and increase your attack ability for a year or at least 6 months. Or no, if I had done anything different for 5 days, we would not have made it. And if I had done anything different, if I hadn't used vouchers, if I hadn't farmed everything, if we hadn't, like, the only thing that would have been better was if more people did more things, and so we would finish faster. But if everybody did the same and I had done anything different, we would not have done it. So anyway, having seen this financial effort required to finalize even Bluestone Titanium and Shadow Titanium, and of course taking into account the continuous pressure that had accumulated on a small number of guild members to do most of the work, that is when I decided to look for outside help for the first time. Like, it crossed my mind in previous months, but I never accepted it because I thought everyone else is a cheater or an Alsbuyer or a macro user or whatever. So I didn't want any of that in my project. And because it was supposed to build us into a guild, so it was supposed to be our thing, on which we build. And I knew that the people in my guild are not Alsbuyers and such. And when I say legit and trustworthy, trustworthy in the sense that they wouldn't cheat. Because as you can see, I couldn't trust them to do shit. But trustworthy at least when it comes to fairness of playing. I knew that they are legit. I couldn't get them involved. Like, I don't know if it was me or them or what happened. I just couldn't get them to contribute more to something that they apparently wanted as well. And so I decided we're gonna need help. And at the time, other players from Jupiter, hearing or seeing on stream that I got close to 6,000, which was relatively high at the time in all parts and so on, they started showing some interest in joining us. Primarily people from Highland, which was one of the top guilds at the time on Jupiter, or at least had top members, top attack ability. And for us, like, they were the highest profile players that we had, because the highest attack ability in our group was Thier from when he transferred, and everyone else had like 10, 6, 8, 9, around the 8 to 10,000 attack ability mark. So bringing 60,000 plus, I thought is gonna skyrocket the project. So around April of 2019, the competition for Mastercrafts had intensified. Some of my project members, I don't exactly remember who posted it, but some of them started looking at what other people were doing in regards to crafting. And one other crafter had started publishing his own values in a similarly style with a spreadsheet and so on. And so some of my guild members were checking his spreadsheet to see how far ahead he is versus us. And I didn't really care much about what other people were doing, because just knowing what other people do doesn't help in any way. It doesn't change how much we do. And if it does, then there's something wrong. Like, if you only do it because of other people doing more than you, then we have a problem. So anyway, I was interested in maximizing our own speed. I knew that the plan that I had come up with was great. I had full faith in it. It was the only logical thing to do. But it was becoming more and more clear by seeing these values that were being brought in by guild members. It was clear that people fell for the servicing scam. So because of that, services were pushing other crafters faster and faster than legitimate farming, than we were able to farm. And at the same time, or roughly at the same date, this kind of servicing other people for osmium crafts and so on gave this other crafter an advantage, a slight advantage. To me, like, that didn't mean much, because 1,000 points is something that we could have done in a matter of days or weeks. And so for a larger group like ours, I didn't see it as a problem or as a threat. It was doable for us to still finish at the estimated time. So the thing is, I did get approached. I got approached by this other crafter, and we ended up with a gentleman's agreement, because I was doing all 5 parts, and this other crafter was doing suits and gloves, and so we kind of overlapped. And the conclusion to our chat sessions, let's say, which were not numerous, but we had a couple of exchanges. The conclusion was that we would have a gentleman's agreement, that I would do suits, and the other one would do gloves, and then we would do the reverse, so that we don't compete on sales. Like, I would sell suits, the other one would sell gloves, and then since we both wanted to have them 10,000, we would swap and then sell. So the point was for us to not sell the same things at the same time. When I was selling suits, he was selling gloves, and when I was selling gloves, he would be selling suits, so that we don't cannibalize over sales. And this, like, for me, this was normal, because I wanted to get along with everyone. I wasn't looking to cut into his profits or business or whatever, because it was, free for all. Like, there was plenty of room for all of us. And the reason, like, I don't have a screenshot or anything. I didn't think that was necessary to save it at the time. I don't necessarily regret it now, but you'll see later on why this is true. Because some people say it's a lie, it's fake, and even he denies it to this day that we had this chat. But I distinctly remember that I promised that I would push suits, and that's why I froze gloves at the level that they were froze. Somehow I expected his suits to stay at 8,000 because we were supposed to do suits and he was supposed to do gloves, but they didn't. And around May, let's say, like 1 month later, things intensified even more because more and more people started contacting me for various craft services. Of course, I rejected all of them because I knew that they were ALS buyers and such and cheaters. And for instance, I got contacted by a few Mercury players trying to get Palladium crafts. And obviously I giggled because these are the people that had laughed at me for having farmed Lake in Dusk and so on. So anyway, in this particular example that I chose of the well-known power wizard on Mercury, the thing that struck me was that he never asked for suits and gloves, which made no sense because those would give him the most damage. So if you're only asking me for helm, boot, and weapons, it means you found suits and gloves elsewhere. So I kind of assumed that he found another crafter to service him. And there were 2 or 3 at the time that could have serviced suits and gloves for him on both Jupiter and Mercury. So obviously I got a bit upset. I was like, hold on a second. So I confronted this other crafter about the email. And what I found out was that while I was pushing suits as agreed, this other crafter was pushing both suits and gloves. And his response was, well, I had some extra ALs and what was I supposed to do with it? So I just pushed suits as well. And this just confirms what I said about the agreement, because if we didn't have any agreement, he would just say, dude, what agreement? Are you crazy? We never had any agreement. But he never denied having an agreement. He simply said, I had more money than expected, so I pushed suits as well. So that is like the only proof you need, because any normal person would say, what the fuck are you talking about? We have no agreement. But he never said that. He said, I had more money, so I did suits as well. And so at that point, the whole servicing Mastercrafts thing became an issue, because when these services hit the market, I think you can all remember the June-July 2019 period, where Fourscore pieces reached 8 millions, 9 millions. It was going crazy because all these ALS buyers were trying to get their items through services. And so they didn't care about the prices, they didn't care how this would influence the market, they didn't care about anything but their own items. And so prices exploded, and even though they exploded, we were still able to take the suits to 8,000. Of course, it cost us more than expected. So anyway, after this other crafter incident, I found out that there are other people doing crafts as well, which somehow covered all parts. Like some were doing suits and gloves, others were doing weapons, others were doing helms and boots and so on. None of them had all parts, but combined, they covered all the parts. And that was a problem because when you do just 1 or 2 parts, you're faster. If you do services, you're even faster. And I was doing all parts, all without buying ALs, without services, without cheating, so that was very slow, because when you have to farm everything yourself or buy it in auction house from people that don't farm, because that was another problem that we were stuck on Jupiter, and we all know that Jupiter is or was the smaller server, and it was full of lazy people at the time. So it was difficult for us to get 2 slots and such. So anyway, what I realized was that we had to push the gas pedal because these guys were boosting their progress with services and buying alts and selling Cabal Cash and whatever other approach they had. And on top of that, they were doing fewer parts than us. And they were doing it on a Mercury, for instance, as an example. Because Jupiter, let's say, had the same conditions, but Mercury was way more generous when it comes to resources. So I realized that everything we had planned and worked for was kind of in danger of being countered because of these few greedy players, I would say, because they saw a lot of profit in this whole thing, whereas for me it was just a way for us to build a guild. Like, remember when I said in the beginning, the main purpose of this was to keep me busy and engaged in the game, and the second reason was to build a guild, and money was like third or fourth or whatever. Like, I never cared about money because realistically, if you want to make money, you don't dump all of it into craft. So if I wanted money, I would have bought alts, I would have farmed for myself, I would have done what all these power players do these days. So obviously alts was not on my mind, but I did take it into account, even if it wasn't the first priority. But for these guys, it seemed like making money was the whole purpose of Mastercrafts. So at this point, I decided to stop the spreadsheet from being public. I turned it private and I only gave access to people in the project because it was still public to the internet up to that point. However, that didn't stop these other crafters and other people from having access to data because they had people in my project that were copy pasting them information. So I was being laughed at and mocked and so on stream with confidential info. And I was like, how do they get this info? It means that somebody in my project is copy pasting information to these other guys. And they knew how much money I owed people, well, how much value I owed people. They knew who got which items, they knew craft outcomes, everything that I was posting on Discord, they knew it. And anyway, I decided to push gloves as well because suits in the meantime had reached 10,000. And considering that the gentleman agreement between suits and gloves with this other crafter had failed because he broke his promise, because he had too much money. So, you know, when you have too much money, you have to be an asshole and break promises. But the point is, now it wasn't just about suits and gloves, it was about other parts as well, because other parts were in danger of becoming too slow. So I was very disappointed, of course, because I was seeing that legitimate farming wasn't as fast as I would have hoped. To the left, you can see a spreadsheet of Mastercraft only. So this is what happened in 2019 when we started Mastercrafts. This is a separate table that doesn't include Craftsman. So even in the new Mastercraft spreadsheet, I was still farming twice as much as other than other high-level players. So of course I was disappointed because we were getting close to June 2019 and we hadn't even taken a single part to 10,000. And so the investment levels weren't very comfortable. Like April, May, and June, I had 3 months to see that I was still the top contributor. And it obviously helped to get outsiders, which are highlighted in blue in the table, but it helped, but it wasn't a permanent fix. Like, it was still less than expected. So around August or something, I pushed suits very hard. But despite our best efforts, Jupiter was kind of dry because all the top players on Jupiter had serviced their mastercraft, and so auction house was being cleaned up of materials all the time, and I didn't have the financial strength at the time to counter this. And I also, there was a time when I actually refused buying materials. So there were weeks and weeks in which we didn't craft at all because prices were too high, and I wasn't gonna spend 7 millions on a four-score piece and increase the costs of the project because a couple of people were crafting, were getting their items serviced. So we kind of struggled between May, June, and July and August, but we were able to get the suits to 10K. In the second picture, you can see that there are 99999, and the other parts I had counted based on suits, and they were almost 10,000, but uncrafted. So I knew I had enough two slots to get them to 10K. They just weren't crafted. And because of the increased expenses, I decided to take parts. Instead of getting all of them to 6K, all of them to 8K, all of them to 10K, and then craft, I decided we would take them one at a time so that we can get one part to 10K, get one part from 6 to 8, from 8 to 10, craft, sell, get some money, and then take a second part from 6 to 8, from 8 to 10, craft, get some money, and then gradually do all of them. So around the end of August, we were able to maximize the suits, and we started preparing the craftsmen from all the stored two slots. And when I say preparing the craftsmen, I mean crafting two slots into craftsmen, because like I said, we had thousands of items in storage. We started crafting Sig Metal, Mithril, Arcridium, and Palladium at the same time, with additional resources. I was able to pump some gloves because I ran out of Arcridium cores, Palladium cores, and such, but I still had red osmiums and Sig Metal. So I was like, I'm not gonna waste energy because we're already late, so I'm just gonna push the other parts as well because we'll need to do that anyway. So at the end of September, we were able to maximize gloves as well. Suits were done on the 22nd of August. Gloves were done on September 11th. So all of this was done 100% legit. No walls buying, no voucher selling outside of the craftsman moment. No servicing was involved. Everything was just 100% stuff that we farmed ourselves. And in the middle of October or something, we kind of grew weapons as well. And we took them from 6 to 9,864, even though we didn't have enough osmiums, if I remember correctly. But anyway, after suits and gloves got maxed out in August and September, we were able to take weapons to 9,874 right before the infamous server merge on the 23rd of October. And the screenshot says 7232 because I didn't update the value in the screenshot. And I did weapons 10K after taking the screenshot before the merge. So as closing thoughts, so those were a few parts. Like I said, today we're still farming. Today all 5 parts are 10,000. Items were given to contributors. Some of them got sold in Venus Auction House. But as closing thoughts to something that lasted 3 years and a half, it's still ongoing. It's just that I consider my part of the agreement fulfilled because I took us from zero, from nothing, to having everything maxed out. except two-handed weapons. So we have, if you look at the screenshot, you'll see we have katanas, which is one-handed. So we have everything 10,000 except amulets and rings, and except two-handed weapons. So those I didn't bother doing because there's too few people needing a weapon, and they consume 2 times more materials and so on. So I just thought it's not worth it. But the whole project lasted up until today. It lasted for 3 years and a half. A lot of people joined and then they either left or I removed them. Some of them in a friendly way, some of them got removed in a less than friendly way. Most of them, I feel, didn't realize how much damage they've done to the project, and they still hold me accountable for what happened. Like, they feel that I did them wrong for some reason. But either way, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, with my level of overseeing, this is what went wrong. So people joined without really understanding the effort ahead of them, which means that they were either not very knowledgeable, or they didn't pay attention to what I was saying, or they didn't pay attention in guild meetings, or they didn't check the spreadsheet for whatever reason. Point is that many of them settled for not doing much, but they expected a lot in return. They got removed in the meantime. I'm pretty sure they talk shit about me. I could not care less because I have the values to prove what I'm saying. The ones that actually stayed and understood the effort, and some of them didn't understand it when they joined, but they understood it along the way. Some of those guys either quit, they waited to be removed by me. I don't know why, because if you don't contribute and you know you don't contribute and it's visible that you don't contribute, why are you still in the guild? Like, why do you stay? It means you're trying to exploit knowledge. I made a nice group of people and you're trying to be a part of that even though you don't deserve it. And I'm talking about the ones that contributed. So these guys were just leeches. That's the only way I can describe them. So some of them have complained that they worked so much and now got nothing or very little in return. To them, I say that everyone got or will get exactly the value that they invested, which luckily for them, for me, on their behalf is not much. Members of the guild or of the project, like mostly the guild, I'm talking about the guild now, members didn't really connect. Somehow I feel like I failed to keep them motivated. Maybe it was because I was too busy dealing with my own frustrations, and it's very, very difficult on somebody like me, because I was a top player when these guys hadn't even heard of Cabal. Like, they probably learned how to play the game from my guides. And I was a top player when these guys were nobodies, when they were leveling to 100. And to take that kind of level of gameplay and freeze yourself to 4,000 attack ability for more than 3 years, that is killing the mental state of anyone. I don't know many people that could freeze their attack ability for 4,000 and then spam dungeons for 3 years and amount that much contribution and keep crafting when you see the shit that has been happening. I don't know many people that can do it. But it kind of quickly became a shit show simply because I didn't cut them off. When I saw them not farming, I should have just removed them. For some unknown reason, I kept hoping that things would improve. I had confidence in people, which today I don't have anymore, but I kept hoping that they would see the effort and they would say, oh, come on, man, let's help this guy because he's fucking drowning in the ocean here. Let's try to help him. Throw a lifeboat or something at him, just help him. That didn't happen. I don't know how else to motivate people. I tried showing them the benefits. I tried to sell this whole idea of mastercrafts. You're gonna be itemized in things that nobody has. Like, it was just an amazing thing to have, but they didn't care about it for some reason. So I don't know why they joined. It's unclear to me at this point, but I should have cut them off, and I didn't, because I kept hoping that anything is better than nothing, and if I cut them off, I get nothing. They don't help at all. Whereas if I keep them, they still don't help at all, but there's always a small possibility that maybe they wake the fuck up. They didn't wake up, they got removed. Some other people joined the project, not the guild, but the guild or the project. They joined for profit. They started sending things that I was. We had a list of accepted things that we kept taking for contribution, in exchange for contribution, and they were sending me things, buying them from auction house, and then sending me things at higher value. So let's say instead of giving me 5 billions ALs so that I can go buy these things in auction house, they bought things themselves for 2 billions and then they send them to me for 5. Because, for instance, we accepted mithrils for 2 millions each, certain parts. They found them in auction house for 300k. They bought them and sent them to me for 2 millions. So that's how they cheated the project, gaining a lot of contribution. Like, some people have 15 billions contribution, but they actually spent 5 or 6 by buying things in auction house, which was a pretty shitty move if you think about it. But it's difficult to prove. Like, you have to trust people, and you have to trust that they won't be dicks. Unfortunately, most of them were dicks because this is today's Cabal. But eventually, I realized what they were doing. I realized what they were doing way before they think I did. I just wanted to see if they keep doing it. Like, I knew that certain people were doing it. I just wanted to see how long will they do it, for how long, and how they react. Because if I just cut somebody off the moment I found, maybe I would make a mistake. So I just let them do it, and they probably think they cheated me, or they think they worked me. But no, they're just dumb players that I let them do it because I was aware of what they were doing. I just wanted to see how far they would go. And the community itself, this is something else that went wrong. Like, the community itself wasn't sufficiently developed to sustain such an effort. And I'm saying that because there were times when we needed a lot of resources and we didn't have them available. So the amount of materials available in auction house from all these active players was infinitely less than the amount that I required to run at full speed to do everything. And last but not least, one of the things that completely disgusts me is the greed of people. And unfortunately, that greed of other people got the best of the project. And if you just do things because you don't understand, that's one thing. But if you do nasty things that hurt other people on purpose, even though you're being explained, like they tell you how it ruins things in general, and you still do it, then I think that's just people being scumbags, in general. But like I said, a lot of the damage came from the inside of the project with people that lied about wanting to help, or that genuinely wanted to help, but then their actions didn't prove that. But a lot of the damage came from the outside as well, not just from the inside, because on the inside I was able to talk to people, I removed them, I encouraged them, we optimized the way we worked and so on. But on the outside, being a low attack ability player, you cannot influence things that much. Like if I wanted to secure certain materials, I couldn't because I was a low attack ability that had no money. All my money was invested into crafting, but crafting wasn't generating anything because these guys were boosting prices and so on. So it was a mess. That was a magic shit show. And because of that, I want to dedicate a special page and explain um, this disgust that I have towards services, because I've been very vocal about services, and this unfortunately attracted a lot of hate. Um, but I want to explain why, and maybe then you'll see that I'm not as crazy and exaggerated as people called me out to be. Like, there's a very specific reason why I hate services. And the thing is, when you do services, you bring materials, you take the outcome, right? So you bring your own materials, you take the outcome of the craft. In standard crafting, like normal crafting, the crafter buys things from you. So you sell your materials to the crafter through auction house or through trades or whatever, and then you buy the thing in auction house. Like, you buy the craft from auction house. That's normal crafting. I buy your materials and I sell you the outcome. Whereas in services, you bring materials and you take the outcome, whatever that may be. So here are some of the reasons, I think top 5, 6 reasons why I said the things I said, and people took it personally and got offended by it. And then, like I said, I attracted a lot of hate for saying these things. But this is the truth. Like, 1 + 1 = 2. Don't hate me for it, you know? So the biggest disadvantage, of course, is the fact that services do not guarantee the outcome like the definition of a service should. Because when you do a service, you pay for something that is certain. So when I pay for cable TV, when I pay for electricity, that's a service, because I pay for electricity, I get electricity. When I go fix my car, I go and fix it, and it's a service, and I pay for it, and the output is 100% there. It's guaranteed output, right? Whereas crafting is a gamble. So it's not a service. So when people say I'm doing you a service, they're actually allowing you to play the lottery. Well, if I want to play the lottery, I'll play it on my own characters. Like, I'm gonna try leveling craft myself. Why do I have to come to you? Because you're not doing a service. It's like you're running a bingo and you allow me to play the bingo, but I lose. Well, thank you for allowing me to lose money, I guess. And the thing is, crafters work with averages. So, as a random example, because of the way crafts are distributed, just like drops, just like everything else in Cabal, let's say you need 30 items, 2 slot, to generate a craftsman. And on average, let's say you need 10 craftsmen for that particular mastercraft. So for that type of item to be to become a mastercraft, you need 300 items, because you need 30 for one craftsman, you need 10 craftsmen for the mastercraft on average, so you need 302 slots. Because of the unpredictability of crafting, you can get a mastercraft in 2 or 3 tries, or in 15 plus, because of the way crafts are distributed. You know, fail, 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 2 slot, fail, fail, 2 slot, 1 slot, 1 slot, fail, 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 2 slot. That's just how it is. That's crafting. It works with big samples. If you craft 5 things, you don't see much. It looks as if it's 100% fail. But in reality, if you craft 5,000, you see 3% success. So 3% success means 3 out of 100. When you only craft 5, or 10 or 15, maybe you don't see the output, right? So that's why crafters work with averages. And this is normal because of the way that crafts are distributed, just like drops. You can do 10,000 dungeons, you don't drop a single slot extender. Here comes Mr. Newbie, does one dungeon, gets the slot extender. But on average, you both got combined, you got one slot extender in 10,000 runs. It's just that you did 9,999 and he did one. But that's Cabal. Like, that's the normal distribution. It's not RNG, it's just normal distribution, right? So anyway, the way this translates into crafts is that you can bring 10 craftsmen, you can fail all of them, and then the next guy brings 2 or 3 craftsmen and he gets a perfect one because you contributed to the fails. And it's kind of unfair because you're actually boosting somebody else's chances of getting a perfect, right? Because you're failing 15 and he comes with the other 5 and he gets 1 in 20, which is the crafter gets 1 in 20, which is the average, but you spent 15 and failed all, and some other guy came with 5 and he got the one that works, right? So, like I said, services do not guarantee the outcome in the way that a service should. So it's not a service, it's a scam, because it's unreliable, because you're paying for the chances, not for the outcome, right? And the risk is on the person requesting the service, not on the crafter, which is something that I completely despise, because if you're so intelligent and if you're so good at Cabal, why can't you take the risk? Why does somebody else have to risk their money on you? So usually when crafters craft, when they do their thing, they risk a lot of things, because it's the same as dungeoning for random, well, seemingly random drops versus alts buying, where people dungeon and they hope for a good drop and somebody else just comes and buys alts, which is a certainty, right? So it's the same with crafting, because in a crafting service, the entire risk is on the person that brings materials, on you, not the crafter. The crafter doesn't give a shit. He just presses a button and, oh, all failed, sorry. But the thing is, you as the person bringing materials are the one that's at risk. And the crafter pays you nothing for your losses, or maybe they pay a small amount. I don't know how it works. I've never done it. But I would assume that the crafter pays you nothing when you lose, and that's money that he should have lost, not you, right? Like, if he doesn't know how to craft, he should stop crafting. If he loses money because he doesn't know how to do it in an efficient way, then he should stop doing it. But instead, what happens is other people lose their money, so these crafting services keep happening, because they're not losing anything, they're losing your money. That's fine. It's like investing in a business that goes bankrupt and then you don't see anything back. Well, that's not how it works. When businesses get bankrupt, there's a certain insurance that can cover for all the investments, even if not fully, right? Anyway, another reason why I hate services is because the crafter always wins. And the reason why I say this is because this is money that's undeserved, right? When you bring materials to a crafter, he either loses nothing because he is trying to craft with your materials, so he's either breaking even, 0 expenses, or he gets a small amount of money when you succeed with your own fucking materials. So you bring materials, he gets free XP if he's not maxed out, and then on top of that, you have to pay him. After you've given him the chance to increase his levels, after you've given him free XP, after you've brought him materials that he otherwise would not afford, you also have to pay for a fee because he clicked. Is that hard work? Because I don't think that is. And not to mention the fact that they level up with your materials and so on, because I think that's undeserved. And that's why it bothers me so much, because it's stealing from other people. It's cheating other people, and they build a business on your backs. And they always win because they either use your materials and fail everything, or when they succeed, they charge you for the perfect. Either way, they don't lose anything. You're the only one that loses. That's why they do it. And speaking of losing, the person that requests the service always loses, and you're losing the fee and much more on top of that. Because let's say you're trying 15 crafts, which are worth 2 billions each. Let's say you're trying 15 palladiums, right? The chance to get a mastercraft, let's say, is 10% for the sake of easier mathematics. With 15 crafts, at 10% chances, you have 150% chances. So technically, you would have one guaranteed outcome and 50% chances of a second. So it can either be 1 or 2 at the end with 15. Anyway, that is 30 billions of your ALs being spent, right? When you try these 15 crafts, you spend 30 billions on getting them. And then, assuming you get a perfect craft out of it instead of 2, let's say you get 1, then you have to pay, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 billions for the success, right? So in total, you gave the guy 30 billions plus 5. So you spent 35 billions on getting a mastercraft, right? If you get the unlucky sequence of crafting when somebody ahead of you succeeded 1 out of 6 or 2 out of 10 or 2 out of 15 when the chance is only 10%, then the average of the crafter is now sitting at 15 or 16% success for the last 20, 30 crafts, which means that the game knows that there were too many successful crafts, and so it will start failing, most if not all, because the game has to take the crafter back to 10% average, because that's what the numbers in the game say. The average outcome for this type of item is 10%. If anybody goes above that, we fail everything so that he goes back to 10, because on average you have to have 10. So if somebody has 15, 16 or 20% success because they got a lucky wave in the normal distribution of crafts, just like lucky weeks of drops where you get 2 slot extenders in a month, highest, it has to even things out. So then when you take these 15 crafts to him, normally you would get 1 or 2 outcomes, but because of the previous craft attempts which weren't yours, like somebody else got perfects before you, you now fail all of them. So instead of spending, let's say, 25 billions for one mastercraft, you end up spending 35. And when you think of the 25 billions for a craft, that could be even less, because you spend 25 billions when you buy it from auction house instead of 35 or more when you do services. You buy it from auction house, but if you sell things in auction house to those crafters, or if you trade them those materials and they pay you for it, then you can actually cover like 10, 15 billions of those costs. So by selling your materials in auction house or to the crafter, you get back 10, 15 billions. So when you spend 25, you actually spend 10, because 15 is what you sold to the crafter. So the crafter gets like 5, 6 billions profit. You buy an item for 10 billions if you farm those things. You get a cheap item because you farmed most of the materials and you sold those materials to the crafter. The crafter gets 5 or 6 billions because he has the ability to convert that farm into something greater. And the only people that lose are people that don't farm. ALS buyers. Right? Because people that do farm a lot, they get money by selling materials, and consequently, they get cheap mastercrafts. Because they sold 60% of the costs, they get them back from sales of materials. So the only real benefit of doing a service is the fact that you can somehow ensure that the outcome reaches you instead of auction house. Because when you buy everything from people, from farmers, then you don't owe them anything. Like if I buy things from auction house, I don't owe anything to anyone. I can sell my stuff to whoever I want. And the real benefit in this case would be the fact that you take materials to a service provider and you get the outcome. But you can get the outcome and save money at the same time if you just have a simple agreement between the farmer and the crafter, just like we had in the contribution system. And then it's a win-win for everyone. Because even if you take items to a crafter, you don't ensure the outcome. I mean, eventually, if you take 20, 30, 40, 50 craftsmen to him, he'll get you 2, 3, 4 items. So you will get yours, but you spend a lot more for it. Way more than you should, when you can just do a project like we did with the contribution, and then it's a win-win for everyone. They get items in exchange for materials. I get a certain amount of money by selling things in auction house. Everybody's happy. We even split the profit. The only people losing are house buyers that don't generate value. And then on top of that, you reward the wrong kind of player, because you reward the hustler, which is what a service does. Because in the mastercrafting process, 97% of the work is done at converting 2 slots into craftsmen, which means you. So if you do a service, you do 97% of the work. Because the mastercrafter does 3% of the effort. So let's say in the previous example, we have 300 items required to generate 10 craftsmen. And those 10 craftsmen, combined with 300 other crafts, you have 310 crafts. Out of the 310 crafts, 300 for getting the 10 craftsmen, and then 10 craftsmen getting 1 mastercraft. In those 310 crafts, you do 300 somehow. The crafter does 10 because he takes your shit and tries it. So he does 3% of the work, and you do 90%, 97% of the work. So not only do you do somebody else's work, because you have to handle getting them crafted, buying them, storing them, risking craft and so on. Not only do you do somebody else's work, but you also pay him for it, while at the same time not saving any kind of money, because these are things that you could sell, but you don't sell because you keep them, because you craft them, because you want a service. So instead of selling all these things to the crafter and then the crafter giving you the outcome, you actually give him everything, you do all the work, you pay for it as well. And for what? For the certainty of just receiving an item first? You can reach 180,000 attack ability without any mastercrafts. Mastercrafts give you 30 amp, which is a potion. We have infinite potions from fucking events forever. You don't need mastercrafts that, like, it can wait. You can upgrade whenever you feel like it. You don't have to be the first. I know it's the hot topic right now. Oh, I'm full mastercraft and so on. It's not worth it. It's way more worth it if you just sell your things to crafters and then wait for things to show up in auction house. Or if you want to get them faster, you get involved in a project like the one that I started back in 2017. I'm not saying you should join me because I'm not taking any more members, but this is the correct approach. This is the correct approach of we all farm, we all win. The only ones losing are the ones that don't farm, that don't play. It's fair and square. And you don't even have to stress yourself over it, because as you play and send materials to a project, let's say, you stack contributions. So you don't have to do anything. You just wait. You just play the game, get 180,000 attack ability. You send your drops, instead of waiting for weeks to sell them in auction house, you give them to somebody that consumes them immediately. And you just wait. And at some point you get back full mastercrafts. And last but not least, this type of approach with services is rewarding the wrong kind of player. It rewards the cheater, the Alls buyer, which I'm against. And this is the reason why I got hated by these top guys, because most of them are Als buyers, let's face it. And I'm sorry, but that's what they are. Like, they might not like it. I don't like saying it, but this is what they do. So when the crafting services were made public, everyone had, and I'm pretty sure that there are Als buyers in my chat right now wanting to insult me and shit. Don't. It's your choice, not mine. I'm just relating what I see. I'm not doing this to get you angry. I'm not doing this because I'm jealous. I could have bought Als as well. I have tens of thousands of euros that I could have spent in Cabal. I just chose not to because I want to play the game, not buy my way through it. But if you chose to buy your way through it, that's your choice. You now have to live with the stigma of being an Als buyer. It's not my fault. Like, you had a choice, you made the wrong choice, period. So no insults and no flame, please, for things that you've done. Like, if you kill somebody and I call you a murderer, you shouldn't flame me back for calling you a murderer, because you should just accept that that's what you've done. That's how it works. Moving on. When crafting services were made public, everybody had unlimited access to top tier items, which were not supposed to be available for everyone because it takes a huge and insane amount of effort to level this, and so only people that deserve to get Mastercrafts should have gotten Mastercrafts. Instead, because people got greedy, cheaters and Als buyers were able to benefit the most because of their infinite resources. Like, they didn't do shit to help. They just came, like, everybody is on a cotton field busting their asses off, and then these landlords just come and say, give me the outcome, give me the output, because I'm your lord. No, your lord ass should go and farm, because that's what we did. But unfortunately, when you do services, these Als buyers have infinite resources, and so obviously there's always going to be some hardcore legitimate player that can afford such services, but in the majority of the cases, let's be honest, like, we're talking about Cabal. So even though there are a few people that worked for the services and for what they have, I can say that most of them didn't get to where they are in a legitimate way. So what ends up happening is that lower level guys try to do services at Osmium, Red Osmium, and Sigmetal level, because that's what they can farm and that's what they can afford. And then that way the master crafter gets his crafts to 10k at your expense for free, and then he sells services that you cannot afford because you're a low pleb that farmed Red Osmium and Sigmetal, and then he sells these services to Als buyers and abusers that end up raping you in TG and in events and in war maps because you took him to 10k, and then these guys came and took the Mastercrafts that they now use to kick your ass. Even worse. So you just killed yourself because you helped somebody get to 10k Mastercrafts. You got Sigmetal, they got Palladiums, they're smashing you even worse, and you contributed to this. Who's gonna have 50 or 60 billions to pay for the first crafts? Definitely not you. Because you just wasted all your money and resources into pumping that guy to 10k instead of selling materials to him and getting a lot of money from him. So instead of making money while pushing somebody to 10k, you lost money, and now when the nice Arcadiums and Palladiums are being crafted, you can't fucking afford them because your money was spent on getting him to 10k. So that's pretty much, like, there are more. I'm not gonna touch upon all of those. I'm just gonna say that morally speaking, this is wrong. And one of the reasons why we were slower than everyone else with crafting is because I had morals. And when you have morals in Cabal, you lose. Because I did not buy Als, even though I could have thrown 40,000 euros at the game. I chose not to. I was slow because I didn't want to scam people with services. Instead, I took all the risks and chances, and I sold the output in auction house. Like for they didn't spend money on chances to get an item. They spent money in auction house on certain items, and because I didn't do my best in trying to stop other crafters, because let's face it, when I started doing this, a lot of them tried to stop me by doing certain things. Like they were whispering my project members, trying to get their shit sold to them. They were trying to talk shit about me and saying that I'm a scammer and that they should stop helping me. They were reselling materials so that it cost me more. They were constantly harassing me on the internet and so on. So there are a lot of things that happened because of these low morals people. But at the end of the day, everything that is being said reflects more about them. Like, people accused me of owls buying because they were buying owls. People accused me of doing services because they were doing services. People accused me of scamming members because they were scamming. So everything that has been said about me is actually a reflection of themselves. So the more shit they say about me, the more I know about them, because I know that that's how they are. Because it has nothing to do with me, it has to do with their own frustrations of not having the intelligence or the determination to do this. So they insult me because they couldn't do it. Or they accuse me of things that they do. So I'm not even angry. When I see people talking shit about me, I'm like, oh, whoa, this guy's just saying everything that he is and how he feels. And that's why I laughed every time. I mean, I got angry, of course, because it's normal for somebody that is wrongly accused. It's normal to get upset and shit, especially since I know I'm 100% legitimate and innocent and upstanding. Like, I've never done anything to hurt anyone, at least not to my knowledge, not intentionally. But anyway, moving forward, this is one of the reasons why I hate this game. Like, I did what I set out to do 3 years ago. I did it despite of everything that was thrown against me. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and even more, and we still did it. So to me, that's a big win. And I don't care about the money, I don't care about my attack ability. I wanted to get everything maxed out. I got it. I can now delete the game. I don't give a shit. I'm not here to measure myself with people, because I was a legend in this game before they even heard about the game. I did a lot of things for this game to be the way it is. Like, unfortunately, it got worse. But when I was an active GM, things were a lot better. And when the game was being published by GamesMasters.com, it was a lot better. Even if it was not perfect, at least we were trying to do things. So I have no regrets. The only regret that I have is that I couldn't take the people from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, and that some were lost along the way. That's pretty much it. But these are some of the main reasons why I talk smack about people, and I kind of stopped because I don't like conflicts. And so this will be the last time that I mention what has happened in the past, because I'm putting that behind me. I don't care anymore. I achieved my goals. I can play anything else at this point. So they tried to stop me, they couldn't. Because I'm better, because I'm more determined, and because I had a group of amazing people to help me. So, fuck it. What can I say? Anyway, as a breakdown, because what would be the purpose of having a project if you don't have some numbers with it? The craftsman phase took roughly 21 months. And the craftsman phase was 8 suits, 8 gloves, 8 helms, 8 boots, one for each class, of course, and then 5 weapons one-handed, plus amulets and rings, roughly exactly 39 parts. And we crafted 66,000 items, around 1,800 for each category. We did blue stins between 0 and 2k points. We did titanium 2 and 4, shadow titanium 4 and 6. Literally the lowest one that gives you XP is the one that you should be using. With a few exceptions like titanium, at shadow titanium and titanium, we spent a couple of shadow titaniums to compensate for fewer titaniums. You can probably use Sigmetal and Mithril to compensate for fewer Redosmiums and stuff like that, but that's something special. So the entire Craftsman project cost us roughly 600 billions, including buying materials, or like 600 contribution plus ALS, because materials were converted into contribution. We also spent a couple of billions on vouchers to transfer materials. We spent some money to unlock categories. So overall 600 billions of value. And January 2019 to November 2020, which is 2 years, was the Mastercraft phase. So 40 parts took roughly the same time as 5 parts. So Mastercraft is like 8-9 times costlier, or like it took us the same amount of time to do 40 craftsmans as we needed to do 5 Mastercrafts. So 1 to 8 kind of. Anyway, the total count of 2 slots for Mastercrafts to be taken to 10,000 were 71,000. So for Craftsmans we spent 1,800 per category. On Mastercrafts we spent 14,200 per category. So it's almost 8-9 times more. The same approach, blue stin from 0 to 10,000, from 0 to 2,000, titanium 2 to 4, shadow titanium 4 to 6, osmium, and so on. Red osmiums can be used from 8 to 10k, so from 8 to maximum, from 8,000 to maximum. But it might take too long because red osmiums are not that common. So you can additionally use Sigmetal once you reach, let's say, 9,000 or so, and then you can further. So between 8 and 9k, you should do red osmiums only. Between 9 and 9,500, you can do both red osmium and Sigmetal, whichever you can find. And then if it's really, really, really needed and you're in a rush, you can actually use Mithrils as well, starting with 9,500 on top of red osmium and Sigmetal. But realistically, you want to be doing it with red osmiums only, or red osmiums and Sig. You'll see the way we did it. So you need roughly 90 craftsmen to do 2k Mastercraft. Considering that you have roughly 15% success for a blue stin, you get one perfect every 6.6 items, multiplied by the 90 required, you kind of need roughly 600 blue stins. That will turn into 90 craftsmen that will take you to 0 to 2,000. For titanium, you need 875 2 slots. At 12% success, craftsmen, that will generate 105 craftsmen. 105 craftsmen will take you to 4,000 Mastercraft. You need roughly 2,000, well, 1,888 2-slot shadow titaniums, which at 9% success for craftsmen will generate 170 shadow titaniums, which will take you to 6. You need almost 4,000 osmiums, which at 5.35 success craftsman percent craftsman will generate roughly 210 osmiums. So I'm sorry. I cannot highlight things because I'm in presentation mode, or at least I don't know how. And then for the final stage between 8 and 10,000, you need 310 craftsmen, be it red osmium, sigmetal, or mithril. Mithril gives more XP but fails more often. Sigmetal is 50-50. Red osmium gives least amount of XP but succeeds the most. So I tried it in numerous ways, 100, 100, 100 each. 160 red osmiums and fewer whichever way I tried it, I needed 310 craftsmen. And if you do the red osmium method of full red osmium until 10,000, you either drop them from Devil's Tower recently, because when we did this, we didn't have Devil's Tower, so we had to actually farm and craft. But these days, you can buy them in auction house, in Devil's Tower, and most likely they're gonna cost you less, because let's say a red osmium costs 100 millions and you can find them for 20 in auction house. So you probably don't have to spend that much money that we spent. But if you're trying to craft everything, know that it will take you 6,400 red osmiums, which will generate 310 craftsmen, which will take you to 10k. If you do 50-50, red osmiums until 9,000 and then sigmetal, you're gonna need 160 red osmiums for 9,000 and 150 sigmetal, or red osmium in the above example, 150 sigmetal for 10k. If you do 50-50, instead of 6,500 red osmiums, you need 3,300 red osmium and almost 4,000 sigmetal. So roughly the same amount of 2 slots, slightly more because of sigmetal. So instead of 6.5k, you need 7,000 items, but you can probably make more money because of sigmetal. And also a slight warning, mithril, arcridium, and palladium should be avoided as hell until you reach 10k, because they use level 4 materials, which are the same materials required for palladium, and it makes no sense to spend them on mithril. So that's something to keep in mind, because it will artificially increase your costs. So like I said, Mastercraft's 5 parts, including transfers and all of that, cost us roughly 550 billions. So if you do the average on, where was it? This one. So 40 parts cost us 600 billions, right? That's an average of 14 or 15 billions per part. So one craftsman cost us 15 billions because of transfers and Jupiter having higher prices and such. If you're on Mercury, you can probably do it with 7 or 8 billions, especially if you do services and such. It costs you nothing, but you do become a scumbag. So if you buy things in auction house, you can probably do it with 10 or 11, more or less. So let's say a craftsman would be worth 10 billions. A Mastercraft is worth 110 billions on Jupiter. Probably 60, 70, 80 billions, depending on Devil's Tower, auction house, if you do services or not. Like I said, this is like the worst case scenario that we had, because we didn't have Devil's Tower, because we didn't do services, because auction house was rather empty on Jupiter. So you can probably pull it off with 80, 90 billions. Either way, one Mastercraft is 10 times more expensive than a Craftsman, more or less. And of course, craft materials themselves, like I said, were 480 billions. The other 70 or 80 billions were actually money that I had to spend on transfers and swapping force gems between the 8 classes. But if you look at the craftsmen's, we had a grand total of 142,623 items. So we crafted 142,000 items, we spent almost 9 million energy. We used 26.6 thousand material cores. We used almost 11,000 upgrade core stacks, almost 28,000, more than 28,000 force core crystals, because we used some of those to convert into discs and shapes and so on. So it's not just pure crystal, because crystal is just the same as upgrade core. So 10,000 out of those 28 were force core crystals, and the other 18 were crystals used for discs and shapes and so on. But overall, the ratio between upgrade core crystal and force core crystal, the way we did it, was 1 to 2.6. And of course, I have a breakdown of crafts as well. We spent 12,000 crafts bluestin, 14,000. So this is combined. This is taking categories to 10K as well as taking mastercrafts to 10K, right? So craftsman plus mastercraft combined, 12,000 bluestins, 14,000 titanium crafts, 17,000 shadow titaniums, 30,000 osmiums, 21,000 red osmiums, almost 20,000 sigmetal, only 6,000 mithrils. Like I said, I tried to stay away from these because they're not really cost effective. More than 12,000 arcridiums because I've crafted more in the meantime, and more than 12,000 palladiums because I've crafted more in the meantime. But you have a breakdown of how many resources were spent. In total, what's important to highlight is the fact that getting a category from 0 to 8,000 is only a third of the cost. And from 8,000 to 10,000, you spend 2 times more money. Just to have an understanding, it's like 0 to 8,000 is leveling to 200. And then 8,000 to 10,000 is like leveling to Overlord 100. It takes 2, 3, 4, 5 times more resources than what you've done already. So you need to remember that out of, let's say 10 billions for a craftsman category, you will get to 8,000 with only 3, 4 billions. And then you spend 6, 8 billions more on maxing the category because of level 3 materials, because of sigmetal, because of other expenses. Luckily, you can start making some money when you reach sigmetal. But this is another reason why I hate services, because people spend a couple of billions getting to osmium, 6,000 or 7,000, and then they did services, and you guys covered the costs for more than 2-3 times than what they invested. So you carried them to victory. But anyway, breaking down shadow titaniums, I kept track of all the crafts that I have done since 2019. Plus, I knew as a bulk what I had done for craftsmen, what we had done for craftsmen. So this is actually the amount of crafts that we did to get to 10K in Mastercraft. Bluestin cost us roughly 7.6 billions. We crafted all of them from 3,002 slots, like I said, from 3,000 items in Port Lux, like I said. So we spent 7.6 billions buying those class converters and doing them in Port Lux. Titanium levels cost us 10 billions, which is roughly 2 billions per category. All of them, almost all of them, like 415 were crafted, and 110 we saved from craftsman phase. Shadow titanium cost us 30 billions in total. It's roughly 6 billions per category. We crafted 410, and more than 440 were saved from craftsman's phase. Luckily, I saved all of those and recycled. Osmiums cost us 113. So you can see how these values increase. So it's 1.5 per category for Bluestin, 2 billions for titanium, 3 times more, 6 billions shadow titanium, 22 billions osmium. So it's like Bluestin and titanium are roughly the same. Shadow titanium is 3 times more expensive. Osmium is 4 times more expensive than shadow titanium, and it's just exponential at that point. And for osmiums, it happens because of level 3 materials. For shadow titanium, it happens because of decreasing chances of success. Because if you look at the table, you'll see Bluestin starts with 15, titanium 12, shadow titanium 9. So they're gradually lower, and costs gradually increase. So that additional cost and lowering of chances is what drives this exponential curve through the roof. And then when you reach osmium, it's even worse. You fall down to 5%, 5.3, and then costs double. And on top of that, you also spend level 3 materials, which further increase the cost. So you need more materials, more expensive materials, and chances for success lower. So then osmiums, we needed 113 billions, roughly 22.6 for every category. We crafted almost 800 of those, and 260 or something were saved, or I found them in auction house. Red osmium, 133 billions in total, roughly 26 per category. 538 were crafted, 262 were saved. And for Sigmetal, 180 billions, crafted out of 20,000 2 slots. Luckily, we crafted only 423, and 327 were saved, or we just found them in auction house for some lower amounts of money. And this is the nice part. This is the summary of contribution at the start of November. So things have changed in the meantime because a month has passed, but this is how contribution looks like. So I invested 565 billions, which is 30% of the whole thing, which means more or less 3.8 billions every week. So for 3 years, I've contributed 3.8 times 4, 15 billions every month. 15 billions every month is roughly 500 millions every day. So 500 millions every day dumped into crafting. And then the blue members are the active ones, which helped me. So you have people from, well, currently Amplified and Ultimate and Overrated, I think, Heresio. The thing is, I kept track of everything, and you can see how much everyone has done. On the left side, you also have older members that reached 1%, which is more or less 20 billions. But if you look at the contribution per week, you can see that the only one that did as much as me was Uncle Psy Sochi. He also did 500 millions a week. I did 500 millions every day, but I was playing more than him. And other people did those values that you see. And if you divide those by 7 or by hours played, let's say, some of these guys were playing for 40, 50 hours, and they only did 150 millions a week, which means that they gave how much? 20 millions a day out of however much they farmed. This is one of the reasons why to the right you have a special mentions list, people that have been removed, people that have left. As you can see, it's a whole fucking list of people below 15 billions. Some of them had nice, well, decent averages, I would say, of contribution per week. Some of these are vouchers that they sold. other people did what I said previously, where they bought cheap things from auction house and they sent them to me for more contribution. And so these hundreds of millions that you see every week are actually half or even less because reasons. And you can see some of the names from the beginning of the presentation, people that haven't even reached 100 millions every week, which is 10 millions every day. So they could have sold 6 divine stones and that was it. Like, that's all their effort, you know? People that send 50, 60, 100 millions a week, that is 400 or 500 millions a month, which is the amount of money that I invested in a day. And these are the people that are now complaining that they've done a lot and that they've been abused, you know, for some reason. Anyway, so far, more than 1 trillion, so 1,000 billions, 1,012 billions have been paid to these guys, because this is one of the mistakes that I've done, because I couldn't stand them anymore, because I wanted them removed and because I didn't want them to call me a scammer, which they ended up doing anyway. I paid them and then I kicked them, and that should have never happened, because the agreement, the original agreement, was that they would give me materials and I would give them mastercrafts. But because they did not have enough contribution to claim mastercrafts, and because I didn't want to see them anymore because I was disgusted, I gave them money. So unfortunately, all these guys, summing up to 100 billions or something, I gave them, instead of investing into crafting, I spent 100 billions to be able to kick these fuckers, because I didn't want to see them anymore, you know? So that was one mistake, because it set us back 100 billions, which I could have used to craft and finish faster and generate more revenue, and I should have paid everybody at the end, especially these guys that couldn't be paid with items, as was our initial agreement. I still have like 40 billions to give, and then everybody has been paid. Everybody that I have kicked has been paid. So in the next 30, 40 billions, that should be done as well. But I'm not repeating the same mistake. Like right now, I'm going to pay them from profit, not from money that should go into crafting. So more than 1,000 billions were covered with either mastercraft items for the blue guys, or money that I have paid to remove people from the project. There are still roughly 300 billions or something. This was prior to boots, and just in the first crafting session. So right now we're starting the second session and third session and so on. So those 300 billions are actually 200 something, and I have right now materials to generate more than 500 billions value. So in time, it will be covered, and then some profit on top of it. Obviously, market conditions are slowing things down, but I'm hoping that's gonna change soon. Like I said, roughly 200 billions were expected to be covered by boots, and they have been covered. And I still have like hundreds of billions in auction house. Like, I'm not even worried about paying people, because like there were some nasty people saying that you won't be able to pay them, how are you gonna pay them if they have mastercrafts from services? And well, this is how I pay them, like full mastercraft plus sales. I've also made a chart of the ideal progress versus reality. So this chart begins in June 2019, when we added outsiders to the project. I didn't count 6,000, from 0 to 6,000, which is Bluestone Titanium and Shadow Titanium, because those are negligible values. So I only looked at 6,000 plus, osmium, red osmium, plus everything. So if we had crafted at full speed, if I had enough contribution from people, we could have finished in the second week of December 2019, so a year ago. The green line is how full energy usage would have looked like. Fastest possible finish for all 5 parts was mid-December 2019. I know it's kind of unreal, but that was like the absolute fastest. The projected value that I had was the purple line, which is 70% speed, and that would have meant March 2020 for all parts, which means the moment when the other crafters started doing services, we could have had gloves done, and then 2 months later suits, and then 2 months later weapons, and then 2 months later helms, and 2 months later boots, and we would have finished in March 2020, which would have saved us 8 months. The blue line is half of the speed of the project, which we didn't reach. Would have saved us 5 months, and we would have been finished in June. And red is what actually happened. So the dotted red line is the projection for 37% speed. So we actually did all of this at a third of the speed. This is the bottom line. So we could have been 3 times faster. And not only that, but you can see the red line, the continuous red line, is the amount of energy used. And the spikes are when I received contribution and materials and money from people, or when I farmed my own money. And then you can see a lot of regions with very low energy usage. That's when I didn't craft anything, because I didn't have shit, because I wasn't given materials and so on. This also includes stuff that so it should have been a red line dotted, which meant crafting at low speed but constantly. Instead, it was very jittery, I would say. It looks like an AKG, like a heart rate, depending on when we had resources. Anyway, the peak in August and September 2019, the one you see in the first lines, where it gets close to 100% and it passes 70% energy usage, that is when we took suits and gloves to 10k. So I had enough resources, we crafted more than 70% of the time. And then you have a smaller peak in October 2019, where it touches the 50% speed. That's when we did weapons. And then it's a decline because we didn't have shit. And then another peak, a small peak in January or February 2020, where it passes 50% again. That's when we tried a small amount of Wizard, Warrior, and Force Blader items. And then April and May 2020, so there's a pause, there's like a break in February and March, when it kind of coincided with me leveling my attack ability, because I stopped investing money in the game, in the project. Money that I made in the game, I invested in my set between December 2019 and March 2020. So that gap is when I stopped dumping money into the project. I got myself to high attack ability, 11,000, if you remember the video from January. And then we had the scroll event, the rat event, in February, and that's when I got 16,000 attack ability. And then March, April, May, I leveled myself to Overlord 100 in GI. So that spike is actually money that I made in GI while leveling myself. And then the April and May spikes and everything that follows is when I sold bingo stuff. And I dumped like 40 billions into crafting from bingo sales, plus Overlord money, plus Afterwards, weapons sales fueled a couple of crafts, and then you see more and more spikes getting higher and higher. It also coincided with new members that gave us a surge of materials, and people just started doing more and more because they, I guess, understood the project better late than never. And so it got better towards the end. And then October 2020 is when we did the helms, which is the big spike, which surpasses 100 because I used craft potions to get more energy than 100%. And the final peak is when we did the boots at the beginning of 2020. Overall, this is how 2 slots were crafted. I made a visual chart. Should be, I mean, it looks complicated, but it's not. So you can see there's an osmium, which is teal. The first one, osmium gloves and suits, were done in June. And then we crafted a lot of red osmiums and sigmetal and mithril to prepare the red osmiums for 10k. And we got to 10k as well. And then you see a huge spike in osmium crafts in August, which coincides with pushing helms. We did suits and gloves in August because they reached 10k, and then in September we did gloves. This is 2019 still, so you can see I was crafting osmiums in the background because I didn't have resources to do these ones. And then October 2019 was weapons to 10k, and then November and January we had a mini session for the wizard and force blader gloves and suits that I mentioned. And then between December 2019 and March 2020 you can see that there's nothing, because that's when I grew from 4,000 attack ability to 12,000 attack ability. And then between March 2020 and July 2020 I farmed Overlord 100 plus bingo sales, and that's what generated the spikes that follow. And then July and August GI, I kept farming GI for, I mean, you know, I've been doing GI since fucking March exclusively to fuel crafts and so on. And then in August, contributors also chipped in with some money, and we also sold some weapons. And then September brought us helms to 10k and did a session and sold helms. And then I prepared boots, and then in November we crafted boots and we sold more boots, and that generated more crafting and so on. But this is, you can see how each category was crafted. And this is how we crafted masters. So if you look at the two and you compare, so this is 2 slots into craftsman, and this is craftsman into mastercraft. This is why I said that crafting masters is just like a tiny fraction of all the effort. So in June, July, we took osmium suits and gloves to 8k, which is the big spike at the beginning, the teal spike, where we crafted almost 200 craftsmen. This is not energy, this is actual numbers of crafts. So then we did, in August, we did suits to 10k and gloves to 10k. In September we took osmium weapons to 8k, and then we had some minor craft sessions. In January 2020 we had that mini session for the wizard and force blader parts that I mentioned. And then starting with May 2020 you can see, so there was nothing crafted for like 3-4 months because we were busy preparing craftsmen. And then there's like a whole bunch of crafts which begin May, August. In May we had a massive glove and suit session for all the classes, which itemized most of the people. And then pause, and then in August we took helms to 8k and 10k. In September, which is the blue spike in August, is 8k, and then The orange spike in September is 10K with red osmiums, and then the smaller spikes are mithril, arcridium, and palladium attempts. And then in September, towards the end, the second big spike was boots, osmium from 6 to 8. And then towards the end, you can see the boots rising again. And that's when we hit 10K with boots. And the major session for all classes in Helms was the spike before November. So in the middle of October, the red and the blue are palladium and arcridium, which generated Helms. And some fun facts. We crafted a total of 142,600 items. We spent more than almost 9 million energy on crafting, on 4 crafters in parallel. The time required to replenish this energy, if you divide it by 4 characters, by 4 crafters, it took us 310 days of non-stop crafting out of 1057, which is exactly the 37% speed that was mentioned. So the crafters were used for like 310 days non-stop, and they were idle for like twice that amount. It's kind of like the equivalent of using them for 8 hours a day out of 24. I personally watched, along with you guys, more than 200 hours of watching the craft bar fill. So just waiting for the bar to fill, I spent 200 hours watching that. Based on the number of crafts and how long it takes for the bar to fill. We used more than 26,000 stacks of materials, 10,000 stacks of upgrade core crystal, and almost more than 28,000 stacks of force core crystal. Like I said, the ratio was 2.66 to 1. To do this project, we used 300 characters, which is the equivalent of 30,000 emails, 600 inventory pages because they had no premium, so they had 2 pages each, 50 warehouse pages because there were 50 accounts, and 150 auction house slots because 50 accounts, 3 slots in auction house, you do the math. 1001 craftsmans were attempted so far, so we crafted 1000 things into master. Obviously most of them failed because master crafts. The craft material equivalent, the value up to date, is 1.9 trillions of ALs. So we've invested 2,000 billions almost, with more to come because we'll keep crafting. I personally spent 182 hours requesting upgrade core crystals and force core crystals and such. Which, if you calculate at 60 millions an hour, I lost 11 billions doing this. And we converted 42,000 stacks of discs level 1. So we bought 42,000 stacks of 127, and we requested 48,378 level 2 discs, boxes, which took 80 hours, 32,000 level 3 requests, which took 53 hours, and almost 18,000 level 4 disk requests, which took roughly 30 hours. Overall, I spent 163 hours requesting disks, which is the equivalent of like 10-11 billions. So now, imagine I had 560 billions invested. I lost another 100 billions because I leveled people for free to level 200 instead of charging them money. So I lost 100 billions doing that, and then I lost 10 billions requesting discs, and 10 billions requesting crystals, and probably 5 billions requesting shapes. So overall, let's say the total amount of money that I had farmed would be close to 700 billions. If I hadn't crafted, if I had played like a normal human being, instead of 700 billions, I would have farmed 2000 billions in 3 years. So the entire project in 3 years I would have done by myself, but it wouldn't have been the project, it would have been me having 100,000 attack ability plus. So instead of having 100,000 attack ability plus, legit, with pure farm, without alt buying, without voucher selling, without anything, instead of doing that, I did this, the project and whatever I have now. And this marks the end of the video. I had initially wanted 3 hours, but it's 3 hours and 10 minutes. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You definitely enjoyed it more than me. I'm gonna stop the video and then I'm gonna change the settings of the stream because it's now set at 2K, 1440p. This is wrapping up the video at 3 hours and 10 minutes. Thank you for watching, and I'm going to restart the stream with my regular settings. Be right back.